Chapter 174. The scene in front of them suddenly froze. The person that had arrived was Tongning. She was originally supposed to be on Feng Kai's show, but at this moment, she was standing in front of Li Danny's manager. Behind her stood Zaheo and 4 tall foreign bodyguards. Backstage, everyone's eyes grew wide as they covered their mouths, waiting to see how the show would continue. Tongning's aura was cold. Her eyes were sharp like an eagle's. Filled with extreme coldness and anger, she looked down at Li Danny's manager. The manager was shocked by the way Tongning was acting. She covered her face and tried to speak, but she couldn't say a word. And Zaheo took the opportunity to help Longjia up from the ground. However, he noticed the red handprints on her face. Tongning. Longjia was a little choked up. She was afraid Tongning would show up. She was afraid Tongning would affect Feng Kai's interview. But why did Tongning still show up? How many slaps did she slap you? Tongning's voice was cold and clear, but it wasn't sharp. It was deep, like she was trying her best to suppress her emotions. 2. Pa. Without waiting for Longjia to finish, Tongning threw another slap towards the right side of the manager's face without hesitation. How dare you hit me like this? Li Danny's manager looked at Tongning in disbelief. He stared at this woman that had always stood aloof from the world. Tongning did not say a word. After venting her anger on her right hand, there was still her left. So, she lifted her left hand and slapped the manager onto the ground. A total of 4 slaps. Tongning returned them double, without missing a single one. What else? Tongning turned to ask Longjia. Seeing Longjia didn't respond, her lips curved upwards as she said to the bodyguards behind her, I've said it before, I won't provoke anyone. But, if someone crosses my bottom line, I will definitely return them double. So Tongning pointed to Li Danny's manager and ordered, make him kneel in front of Longjia. Make him kneel in front of Longjia in the same way he made Longjia kneel, remember double? Tongning's words were like a sentence. Even though she knew there were so many people present today, even though she knew her modeling career would be affected, if she couldn't even protect the people around her, then, even if she became a supermodel, was the point? Tongning's eyes turned red, but she had an irresistible force. Li Danny's manager was scared stiff, especially as the bodyguards held him back. He felt his mind go blank. All the pleasure he felt just now had turned into retribution at this moment. Moreover, it was double retribution. Tongning, don't go too far. Seeing this, Li Danny finally stood up. However, Tongning took a step towards Li Danny, lowered her head, and laughed. As she lifted her head, she received another slap across the face. Not only did she hit the manager, she also hit Li Danny. Since you said I bullied you, I'll bully you today. What about it? Li Danny stared at Tongning with her eyes wide open. Because she had never been humiliated like this before, her expression was twisted and fierce. You dare hit me? Compared to what you've done to my assistant, I've only paid back 1/10. She was sent to me by Commander G. Are you trying to rebel? President Lon? Tongning sneered as she approached Li Danny. What right does she have to order my assistant around? Li Danny, Longjia is my personal assistant. She has nothing to do with Chung Tian Entertainment. You are using my assistant? Who gave you the right to do so? This is a matter between you and President Lon. All I know is, Longjia is my assistant tonight. How could Li Danny admit defeat? She obviously knew she couldn't stand on her own 2 feet, yet she was being unreasonable. Plus, Tongning, you hit me. Do you not want to be a model anymore? Li Danny yelled. This is my show. Tongning, how dare you come here and cause trouble? Your show? But I don't think it will be anytime soon. Tongning scanned her surroundings. The look of disdain on her face was clear. If she didn't teach Li Danny a lesson today, her surname wasn't Tang. What do you mean? What I mean is, from today onwards, as long as it's your job, I will fight for it. As long as you like it, I will fight for it. You bullied my assistant for half an hour, so I, Tongning, will suppress you for the rest of your life. As Tongning said these words, she had no hesitation and no fear. Even if she was to become the headline tomorrow, even if people said she was a bully, she would not back down. After hearing Tongning's words, everyone was stunned by her handsomeness. Because they had seen the whole thing with their own eyes, they knew that Li Danny had gone too far. Although Tongning wasn't in the right to hit her, seeing her assistant being forced to kneel. On top of that, she even had to kowtow. If she could endure it, she wouldn't be human. Everyone secretly cheered Tongning on. Even those that were looking down on her and were waiting to watch a good show. At this moment, they were all convinced by Tongning. A person that was willing to stand up for her assistant and was willing to gamble on her career as a model. Who else could do what Tongning had done? They were all at the bottom of society, or were still struggling at the bottom. So, they had all been bullied. But, at that time, they had never met Tongning, who was so protective of her. You? You want to steal my job and suppress me for the rest of my life? Tongning, are you dreaming? Li Danny obviously didn't believe Tongning's words. Who do you think you are? Even Lan Shi hates you. Do you think you can suppress me? Tongning did not say a word. She simply turned her head and yelled, Who is the boss of High E? Can you invite the brand boss over tonight? I'll go. Within the crowd, a staff member from the brand immediately raised his hand. Not long after, a Frenchman appeared in front of everyone and looked at Tongning and Li Danny suspiciously. I would like to see how you are going to steal my job. Li Danny looked at Tongning like she was watching a good show. She knew Tongning was just a paper tiger. She couldn't show her true abilities. However, just as Li Danny revealed a pleased expression, everyone broke out in a cold sweat on Tongning's behalf. Tongning pulled out her phone and made a phone call. It doesn't matter who you call. However, after 3 rings, the phone was picked up. A clear voice could be heard from the other side. Hello, Hirue Entertainment. I am Emoting. Emoting. Was actually Emoting? The person Tongning called was actually Emoting? The CEO of Hirue Entertainment. Emoting? Li Danny's expression gradually turned pale. To be exact, she took a few steps back in disbelief as a thin layer of cold sweat formed on her forehead. President Emo, sorry to disturb you. There's something I would like to borrow your assistant to come to Hai. I've run into a bit of trouble. Do you need me to come personally? Emoting's lips curved upwards as he asked gently. Chapter 175. No need, it's just a small matter. It's not good for your status. What right did Li Danny have to see Emoting? Lu Che was more than enough. Emoting was silent for a moment. He did not hang up the phone. Instead, he made a phone call to Lu Che. Hai Hall, immediately help Tongning deal with the problem. As long as Tongning needs anything, help her. Tongning was on speakerphone. So, through the phone, Emoting's words were clearly transmitted to every corner of the waiting room. Everyone had a complicated expression on their faces, especially the pale-faced Li Danny, who had yet to recover from the shock. Is this person enough for me to suppress you for the rest of my life? Tongning asked Li Danny coldly as she put away her phone. Li Danny did not say a word. Her body felt like it had been sucked dry as all her strength was drained away. She held onto the edge of the table to prevent herself from falling. She had never imagined Tongning actually knew Emoting. How could she have such a strong backing? How could Emoting make a personal appearance? Through Nzaheo's explanation, the brand representative was able to understand the entire situation. Naturally, he had his own considerations and thoughts. Replacing Li Danny immediately was the best move. But even though he already had a plan, he still decided to wait for Lu Che to arrive and see if he had any other requests. So, while waiting for Lu Che to arrive, Li Danny and her assistant had never experienced such torment in their entire lives. Every minute and second felt like they were waiting for their judgment. She really wanted to find an excuse to leave, but they were already surrounded by onlookers. She really wanted to contact Lan Shi, but Lan Shi had brought up Hirue. Even if she contacted Tin Lan's eyes, there was no way she could change anything by tonight. So, Li Danny lowered her head and looked at her toes. After a while, she still couldn't give up. She suddenly grabbed onto Tongning and whispered, What do I have to do for you to let me go? Tongning, on account that we are from the same company, let me go this once. I promise I won't go against you again. Tongning looked at Li Danny's arm and gently freed herself. It's too late. You can't give others a chance to change. I really can't lose. I can't lose my job as a model. From the moment you humiliated Long Jie, you no longer have the right to be a human. You still want to be a model? Tongning took a step back. Her voice was cold and filled with ridicule. Li Danny, does an assistant not have any pride? You yourself also climbed up from the bottom. Can you afford to let others kneel to you? Since you've accepted this kneel, then you must pay a price worthy of this kneel. Of course, Lan Shi was also the reason why she refused to back down. Lan Shi had stepped all over her bottom line. If she continued to swallow her anger, would she still be Tongning? After hearing this, Li Danny's hand, he was trembling nonstop, because at this moment, she felt a chill running up her spine. Only now did she feel a lingering fear. President, Mo, what will you do to me? Tongning did not respond to Li Danny, but the people around her began to whisper amongst themselves. When it comes to dealing with people, Hai Rui has never been lenient. Exactly, what other consequences would there be for offending Hai Rui? Hurry up and announce your retreat from the industry. Do you still remember the king from before? Because of his arrogance, he didn't listen to Hai Rui's arrangements. What happened in the end? In one night, he turned into a star from yesterday and is now working as a sanitation worker. Li Danny's eyes grew wide in fear. Her manager was even more exaggerated as she soaked the area she was kneeling on. She was so scared that she lost control of her bladder. That scene was as funny as it could get. As funny as it could get. Half an hour later, Lu Che arrived at the backstage of Hai Yi. The first thing he saw was Long Jie's swollen face. So, he directly grabbed her from Nzaheo's arms and asked, "How did you get hurt so badly? Who was it?" Hearing Lu Che's stern questioning, Li Danny's manager's expression could no longer be described as brilliant. As for Li Danny, she obviously lost her balance as she slid down to the ground. Very well. Lu Che looked around. He was also angry at the hurt and humiliation Long Jie had suffered. So, his voice was lower than usual and slightly trembled. After listening to the entire story, he directly asked Li Danny and her manager, "Did you guys know that Long Man is my fiancé?" Fiancé? So, it turned out, Tongning's assistant was Lu Che's fiancé? At this moment, all of their doubts seemed to have been answered. How did Tongning know Mo Ting, and why did Mo Ting help her out of politeness? Everything seemed to be explained. So, it turned out, Long Jie was Lu Che's fiancé? This was something that Tongning had discussed with Mo Ting beforehand. After all, the debt between her and Lan Shi needed to be slowly settled, one debt at a time. So, she wasn't going to reveal her trump card today. So, they told Lu Che to announce his relationship with Long Jie to let Lan Shi know that she had offended someone she shouldn't have. Before Lu Che could say anything to the brand representative, Li Danny's legs turned to jelly as she knelt on the floor and grabbed onto Tongning's skirt. "Tongning, I beg of you, help me put in a good word. Slap me? You can slap me for as long as you want, as long as you help me plead for leniency." "You've got the wrong person," Tongning hinted as she hinted that Li Danny should look for Long Jie. Long Jie let go of her right hand and lifted her head to look at Long Jie. However, Lu Che directly said to Li Danny, "Get lost. Stay away from her." Not only this, Lu Che also announced to the public that if anyone dared to use Li Danny again, they would be going against him. Although Lu Che did not use Hai Rui's name, Mo Ting had already told him to satisfy Tongning in any way she wanted. So, Lu Che's words were equivalent to Mo Ting's. In an instant, Li Danny became a taboo within the industry. No one dared to challenge Hai Rui's authority and was replaced on the spot. Afterwards, contract cancellations began to arrive one after another. Li Danny couldn't take it anymore as she fainted in front of everyone. From start to finish, she only fainted in less than 20 minutes. So what if she was a famous model? In front of Hai Rui, she still had to kneel. She deserved it. The amount of information that night was too much. But those with eyes could see everything clearly. Hai Rui never interfered with other entertainment agencies' internal matters, but Li Danny was blind. Lu Che and Mo Ting did not mention Hai Rui, but their identities and status were already there. Yet, Li Danny was bullying someone else's fiancé. Did she really think she was a part of the fashion industry and entertainment industry? Framing people, humiliating people, slapping people, and forcing them to kneel down. Li Danny couldn't deny everything that happened. As for what news would be released the next day, that would have to wait until tomorrow. But there was still another problem: Tongning's interview. Her original motive for going on the show had changed. Now, she only had one goal: to get Long Jie's grandfather back. At the same time, she wanted Lan Shi to kneel down. Chapter 176. The staff from High E quickly rushed Li Danny to the hospital. Afterwards, Long Jie grabbed onto Tongning's hand and asked, "Why did you come? You obviously knew this was Lan Shi's scheme. She didn't want you to appear on Feng Kai. Why did you have to be so stupid?" Tongning looked at Long Jie and gave her a hug. She gently rubbed her back. "You're the stupid one. Do I need you to endure so much for me? Do I need your protection? If anything happens to you and your grandfather, do you think I'll feel good about it?" But now. Tongning let go of her and patted the back of her hand comfortingly. "Don't worry about anything. Let Lu Che accompany you to the hospital for treatment. While you're at it, you can enjoy Li Danny's ugly side." "But did you think I would let Lan Shi get away with it?" Tongning's words had a hidden meaning. It was clear what she was trying to say. "I am being protected by Emoting, and you are being protected by me. So, I will help you find your grandfather and make sure he is safe and sound. Let's go." Lu Che helped Long Jie walk out. But today's incident has been blown out of proportion. Tongning hit someone. Shouldn't she do some PR? Won't her image be affected? Long Jie was still worried. "You should take care of yourself first." Lu Che led her into the car and went to the pharmacy to buy some swelling medicine and ice. "The madam is smarter than you think. She would never allow herself to be taken advantage of. You should take care of yourself and help her. Don't make her worry. She needs to focus on dealing with Lan Shi." Long Jie hugged onto the ice. She was a little tired, but she was also worried about Tongning and her grandfather. Lu Che noticed she was distracted, so he took the ice from her arms, hooked his arm around her head, and pressed it against her face. Long Jie tried to avoid it in pain, but Lu Che held on to her and said in a low voice, "Don't move, this will help the swelling go down." Long Jie thought back to the scene a moment ago, and the words Lu Che had said, "fiancé." Although she felt warm, she knew deep down he was simply following Tongning and Emoting's orders. So, she reminded herself to be clear-headed. She was older than Lu Che and had neglected many aspects of her body, especially her figure. For someone like Lu Che, there was no way he would fall for her. "Fiancé, thank you, but I know it's fake. You don't have to worry. If you have a girlfriend, I can explain it to her." Lu Che looked at the bruises on Long Jie's face and tightened his grip. "I don't have a girlfriend, but he wouldn't be interested in someone like me who's a little fat." Long Jie thought to herself. Plus, she had just escaped from danger. What was she thinking now? Grandfather and Tongning were still in danger. At the same time, at Chengtian Entertainment, Luo Hao walked into Lan Shi's office with a complicated expression. After placing some documents on the table, he placed his hands on his waist and said to Lan Shi, "Tongning didn't let you down and appeared at High E. Feng Kai's interview is at 8 p.m. I don't think she'll make it." "Isn't that great?" Lan Shi sneered. Sure enough, this tactic worked against Tongning. But Li Danny was ruined by her. Luo Hao said gloomily. "What do you mean?" Lan Shi lifted her head with a complicated expression. "Guess what Long Jie's identity is?" Luo Hao asked as he supported himself on the edge of Lan Shi's table. "Just tell me directly." "She is the fiancée of Hai Rui's CEO, Emoting's assistant." Tongning contacted Hai Rui on the spot, and Lu Che arrived half an hour later. In order to get revenge for his fiancée, he directly kicked Danny out of the entertainment industry. "Everyone in the industry knows about this," Luo Hao explained excitedly. "After this battle, Tongning has completely broken your right arm. Now, all that was left was him, her left arm." After hearing this, Lan Shi went online to search for relevant information. However, because of Hai Rui's planning, the information she found was not as good as the gossip in the industry. Tomorrow, Hai Rui would definitely release an announcement to explain the entire situation. Hai Rui had always done a good job protecting themselves, whether it was their artists or staff. That's not right. If Long Jie is Lu Che's fiancé, why didn't she mention Lu Che as soon as she was threatened? But if Long Jie isn't Lu Che's fiancé, why would Hai Rui stand up for a mere assistant? It's also a little unimaginable. I'm afraid this incident will take some time to sort out. But it's not easy for us to train an international model. Are we just going to let them destroy her? Lan Shi sat up from her office chair, feeling a little scared. Li Danny is no longer the most important point. The most important point right now is that we have threatened Long Jie's grandfather. This was the thing that gave Lan Shi a headache. Hai Rui was like a sleeping lion. It wasn't something she could afford to offend. After thinking for a moment, Lan Shi said confidently, "We will not admit to this matter. I still feel that there is something fishy about Long Jie and Lu Che's relationship. Otherwise, there would be no reason for them to remain silent for so many days. Although I don't know how Tongning managed to get involved with Hai Rui, we can't afford to lose our footing right now. I think the most important thing right now is to deal with Tongning. If we allow her to get close to Hai Rui, it will be too late." Luo Hao tried to convince Lan Shi. Lan Shi glanced at Luo Hao. Her mind was in a mess. Back then, it was a moment of carelessness that caused her to sign Tongning to Cheng Tian. That was why she had caused so much trouble and even ruined Li Danny. How about we release Long Jie's grandfather first? After all, he has no idea that we are keeping him under house arrest. No. Luo Hao stopped Lan Shi. He still has a use for him. But this old man has a heart condition. Lan Shi noticed that Long Jie's grandfather was taking his medication on time. If we release him, you may not be able to find another way to control Tongning. Will you still release him? Lan Shi thought for a moment before replying, "Of course not. How can there not be sacrifices when doing something big?" Luckily, we stopped Tongning from going on Feng Kai's interview. Otherwise, according to her temper, after today's incident, there's no way she would let it go. Lan Shi suddenly felt a little angry. Is it because we haven't been ruthless enough with this slut? Luo Hao, we need to prepare for the second step of our plan. However, just as the couple were discussing the next step of their plan, Luo Hao's assistant suddenly knocked on the office door. "Director, President, something big has happened. Come in and talk." The young assistant did not say a word. He simply turned on the television in Lan Shi's office and switched to the live broadcast of Feng Kai's interview. At this moment, Tongning was taking careful steps as the host invited her into the studio to take a seat. Lan Shi looked at the time, and then looked at Tongning on the television in disbelief. What is happening? How can Tongning still go on the interview? Hurry and find someone to cut the show and replace the host. Drag Tongning out. How is this possible? Didn't Tongning go to Hai Center? Could she have transmigrated? This is an official program. We can't do anything about it, Luo Hao said calmly. Luo Hao warned Lan Shi calmly today. We stepped on her assistant. Think about it. How will she get back at Cheng Tian and you? She wouldn't dare. Lan Shi said stubbornly. She wouldn't dare? What would Tongning not dare to do? Chapter 177. Seeing Lan Shi in this state, Luo Hao immediately made a phone call to confirm with people within the industry. However, he discovered both he and Lan Shi had made a fatal mistake. We both calculated the time incorrectly. What do you mean? Lan Shi didn't quite understand what Luo Hao meant. The reason why Tongning dared to appear at Hai so confidently was because there was no clash in time. Feng Kai's interview had already been rescheduled from the first few episodes and had been delayed by an hour. However, we had overlooked this detail. It seemed everyone remembered that Feng Kai's broadcast time was 8 p.m. So, even though they had announced the change a long time ago, Lan Shi did not take it to heart and thought Feng Kai's broadcast time had not changed. This Tongning is way too smart. What should we do now? All we can do is watch as Tongning appears on the show? Lan Shi angrily slammed her hands on the office desk. She had put in so much effort, and even resorted to kidnapping. Yet, in the end, she had been played by Tongning. In reality, when Tongning found out about Long Jie being threatened, she was already on her way to the television station. As soon as she found out Li Danny's show was at 7 p.m. and her interview was after 9 p.m., she immediately headed to Hai Hall. The only thing she found strange was, why did Lan Shi leave her with a 2-hour time difference, allowing her to travel back and forth between the two venues? Was this Lan Shi's so-called obstruction? After putting in so much effort, was she really trying to stop her from participating in Feng Kai's recording? Was she serious? And Zaheo also laughed. According to my understanding of Lan Shi, this time, she definitely made a mistake. What kind of mistake? Tongning asked. She probably didn't know Feng Kai's broadcast had been changed, and Zaheo couldn't help but laugh. After leaving Hai, Tongning originally planned to rush to the television station as Zaheo had arranged. But, as soon as she entered the parking lot, she spotted Emoting's car. So, after giving Zaheo a heads up, she pulled open the car door and sat in the front passenger seat. Didn't you say you didn't need to come? Emoting turned his head and looked at Tongning. Using his warm palms, he lifted her palms and examined them. Didn't you bring bodyguards? Why did you have to do it yourself? Does your hand hurt? Tongning originally thought Emoting would be concerned about Long Jie, Li Danny, and Lu Che's performance. Who would have thought? The first thing he asked was whether her hand hurt. It was very satisfying at the time, but now I'm a little numb. Tongning told the truth. After all, she had slapped him 5 times with all her strength. It was impossible for her to not feel anything at all. Emoting held onto her hand and rubbed it gently. His expression was helpless but doting. I never expected you to do it yourself. Do you really think I have a good temper? Tongning smiled innocently. That's because someone knows that I have a backer. That's why he dares to do it. Emoting glared at her. His tone was a little doting and reproachful. Of course, it was a far cry from how he normally acted in the office. You never learn to be good. Instead of using a foolproof plan, do you insist on making me worry? Emoting let go of her hand and focused on driving. He needed to take Tongning to Feng Kai for the interview. There are some things that you can only remember the pain that others have suffered because of you. This time, Long Jie had suffered for her. She had endured the humiliation and was even threatened by Lan Shi's family. Yet, she had never considered betraying her. So, not only did her hand hurt, even if it broke, she wouldn't feel it wasn't worth it. Emoting knew what kind of person she was. He also knew that she would disregard her own safety for the people around her. However, in the past, she was all alone. But now, she had him behind her. Plus, Lan Shi is still holding on to Long Jie's grandfather. Aren't you already on your way to ask her for him? Tongning was stunned for a second. She suddenly leaned against Emoting's shoulder. Sometimes, after dealing with these monsters for too long, I feel like I'm no longer human. But, the way I dealt with Li Danny and the way I dealt with Lan Shi, I don't regret it at all. I want Lan Shi to know that it's fine for her to touch me, but if she touches the people around me, I won't let her rest in peace. Emoting looked straight ahead as he drove. His voice was firm and calm. No matter if you are simple or complicated, as long as you are still Tongning, to me, there is no difference. Tongning's heart was moved, but she didn't know how to express her love for Emoting. So, all she could do was bite down on his shoulder. Emoting did not cry out in pain. His lips simply curved upwards. He understood how it felt. Sometimes, when you like someone, you'll suddenly not know what to do. It was because of Lan Shi's mistake that the scene in front of them happened today. Tongning's appearance at Feng Kai's interview. After putting some effort into her makeup, Tongning appeared in front of the audience in a light purple A-line dress. She had a light touch of makeup on and her long, silky hair flowed down her back. She faced the Beijing audience in her most natural state. As she smiled, her dimples appeared. The two hosts in the studio had already prepared a question board. They had already organized the segments that Tongning would be going through and the questions that she would be answering. As for the studio, they also put in a lot of effort. They placed posters of Tongning's magazines and advertisements. They were extremely meticulous. The time was 9 p.m., and the interview officially began. As it was a live broadcast, both the host and the guests had to be extremely careful with their words. Because of this, a lot of celebrities accidentally revealed their secrets due to their carelessness. As a result, a lot of rumors began to spread. Of course, Tongning soon returned to her usual calm self. No one would have imagined that just an hour ago, She was slapping Li Danny and her assistant across the face at Hai Yi's show. After some small talk, the host quickly moved on to the warm-up segment. He then asked Tongning, I vaguely remember 3 months ago. You were still a bride waiting to be married off. But, all of a sudden, you announced your comeback. Afterwards, you were caught up in an intense battle with Tianyi. What kind of situation did it take for you to make such a firm decision to start afresh? Can I really tell you this? After hearing the question, Tongning suddenly let out a gentle laugh. Take note, our show is all about telling the truth. Otherwise, all your answers may be taken by your fans and slapped in the face. The host smiled as he reminded Tongning. In his hand was a cute hand clapper. Of course, the dubbing was to make the audience laugh. Tongning was stunned for a moment before replying, It's nothing special. I simply experienced a betrayal that many people have experienced. Afterwards, I grew up. I am a person that will definitely let go if I say I want to. Okay, that was just a warm-up question. Next up, we are going to ask an explosive question. Are you married? Chapter 178. After asking this question, the host froze for a moment. She felt this question was within the scope of breaking the news. It was like she was trying to force Tongning into a corner. But this was completely dependent on the guest's intelligence and EQ. The 100-plus fans in the live broadcast room looked at Tongning. The viewers in front of their televisions looked at Tongning. Even Immerse, who was waiting in his car, couldn't help but smile when he heard the broadcast. He had previously asked Tongning how she would answer this question during the interview. At that time, Tongning simply smiled mysteriously, but now, she couldn't hide anymore. Immerse's heart was filled with anticipation, but of course, he was also worried for Tongning. But, in the end, he still decided to trust her. Why are all the other guests so gentle with their questions? Yet when it comes to me, they're asking about my ex and whether I'm married. Tongning looked helpless. But everyone could tell that she wasn't actually impatient. She was simply trying to liven up the atmosphere. Don't try to hide and don't beat around the bush. Hurry up and answer. The host did not buy her act. Actually, from the moment Tongning appeared on the show, the host had already let out a sigh of relief. Tongning was an extremely mature interviewee. She knew what to do, knew how to liven up the atmosphere, knew how to interact with people, and most importantly, she was extremely approachable. On the surface, she looked like a girl next door. I'm married, Tongning replied straightforwardly. Everyone's eyes grew wide as they pretended to be surprised. They never expected her to directly admit it like this. Immerse's heart skipped a beat as he listened to the live broadcast. But, a moment later, he smiled helplessly and dotingly. He really couldn't do anything about this cunning girl. Under normal circumstances, when an artist really had a problem, they would think of a way to resolve it instead of directly admitting it like Tongning did. So, on a show like this, those that directly admitted it were usually fake. Above all, Tongning's tone sounded like someone had just asked her if she had eaten. It was extremely casual and normal, making it hard to believe, even though she was telling the truth. You're married. The host pretended to be surprised as she smiled and asked, In that case, who are you married to? The most powerful person in the entertainment industry. Tongning once again told the truth. But, after hearing this, the host deliberately played around with her hair. Isn't that me? The live stream room burst into laughter. It turned out, his dear wife not only knew how to be a good model, she also knew how to create an effect that was hard to distinguish between the real and the fake. Sometimes, if you exaggerated things, even if they were the truth, no one would believe you. Afterwards, the host noticed the ring on Tongning's finger. Hey, you're wearing a ring? You look so real. Come, hold it up for everyone to see. Tongning did not hesitate at all as she held up her right hand with the wedding ring on it. Everyone could clearly see what the ring looked like. Actually, it really was a wedding ring. Immerse, who was sitting in the car, couldn't help but touch the ring on his left ring finger. The two of them seemed to understand each other. And Zaheo, who was watching the live broadcast, was terrified as he broke out in a cold sweat. How could she be so brave? Most importantly, everything she said was the truth, but she was treated as a joke by everyone. Just now, we asked a relatively easy question, but Tongning easily dealt with it. So, from now on, we are going to ask a few questions that may offend people. Think carefully before you answer. The host suddenly hid his smile and became a lot more serious. Although Feng Kai's questions were sharp, the host knew how to respect the guests and kindly reminded them. Please go ahead. Actually, we have also heard some bad rumors. For example, after signing with Chung Tian, the agency did not have high hopes for you. In fact, there were rumors that the resources that were already in your hands were taken over by someone else. So, what is the truth? Can you explain it to us? With the mention of Chung Tian, the ones that should be nervous were Lan Shi and Luo Hao. According to Tongning's EQ, it was easy for her to deal with a question like this. However, through the TV screen, Lan Shi noticed that Tongning's gentle gaze had suddenly turned cold. In fact, she even sneered. Tongning knew it was finally time for her to ask for a Moting. Of course, not only Lan Shi, even in Zaheo had no idea how Tongning was going to ask Lan Shi for a Moting. In fact, he couldn't believe it. How was this possible? How could she make Lan Shi hand over Long Jie's grandfather just by sitting in the studio? Actually, the fact that I am sitting here is the best answer, Tongning said with a smile. President Lan is a very understanding person and a very good boss. That's why we haven't completely fallen out with each other like the rumors say. It's just that there is competition within the agency. This is normal. As the CEO, President Lan needs to look at the big picture. I can understand that. Speaking of which, I also want to mention something very heartwarming. Tongning suddenly faced the camera and gave an example. My assistant, Long Jie, has a grandfather at home. For the past 2 days, she has been unable to contact him. My assistant was so anxious that she looked everywhere for him. She even went to the police. Tongning emphasized the word police. The police have already filed a case, just as they were about to launch an investigation. However, we found out from President Lan that in order to give Long Jie a surprise, she brought my assistant's grandfather to Beijing to take care of him. We almost had a misunderstanding. Look, President Lan is such a considerate and warm-hearted person. But, in order not to make President Lan feel troubled, I will get my assistant to take my grandfather home in a moment. Thank you, President Lan, for that surprise. We appreciate your kindness and I will always remember it, Tongning said in seriousness as she expressed her gratitude towards Lan Shi. However, in her words, there was a hidden meaning that only the few of them could understand. After watching this, Lan Shi was tempted to smash the TV. Tongning was threatening Lan Shi to hand over a Moting by calling the police. It was just like how she had threatened Long Jie to betray Tongning. Tongning was giving her an eye for an eye. Not long after, Tongning mentioned that Long Jie's grandfather was at her place. It was obvious. She wanted everyone to keep an eye on her. After all, Tongning had openly asked for Long Jie's grandfather on TV. If anything happened to him, she would be held responsible. So, she didn't dare to do anything to him. In the end, Tongning said she would come to pick him up immediately. If she didn't hand him over, the public would continue to speculate. A response like this created a phenomenon in the industry. The sensitive paparazzi would never let her off the hook. What an A-grade model. What an intelligent Tongning. She never expected Tongning would do something that she couldn't resist. She had no choice but to hand over Long Jie's grandfather. Of course, there were those that hated Tongning and those that admired her. And Zaheo never expected Tongning to be so smart as to solve the problem of finding Long Jie's grandfather. What was she looking for? She wanted Lan Shi to hand him over on her own. In fact, she wanted Lan Shi to come out unscathed. She wanted Lan Shi to suffer a double loss. If there was a problem with Long Jie's grandfather, then there was a problem with her. Chapter 179. After hearing Tongning's words, the host could sense something was amiss. Why would the CEO of a company give a surprise to an artist's assistant? Why did she kidnap someone's family for no reason? She even caused someone to call the police. It was obvious. This was a dirty trick used by the entertainment industry to control Tongning. The host had been in the industry for many years, so he had seen through a lot of things. Especially after hearing Tongning's example, He knew deep down that Tongning was directly asking Lan Shi for someone. This smart woman used the most gentle method to do something that no one could resist. Since this is all a scandal and you've already clarified it, let's move on to the next question. Tongning, you need to keep up with me. After a serious question, let's move on to an easy one. As long as it's easy, it's not easy. Tongning played along with the joke. The host laughed as he picked up the whiteboard and flipped it to the other side. It was a photo of Tongning and Mo Ting from the LM commercial. Regarding this backview dream man, isn't it time you gave us an answer? The beauties on set have been waiting for a long time. Tongning covered her mouth shyly as she acted like she was in a difficult position. Do you think you can run away? Quick, tell us who this is so everyone can see his face. The host teased mischievously. His cooperation with Tongning was flawless. Tongning felt her head hurt as she asked her fans in a quiet voice, "What should I do? Do you guys really want to know?" Her fans nodded their heads continuously. Okay. Tongning was finally ready to give in. However, her okay was only one word, yet it made Nzeheo's heart almost stop. Mo Ting's attention was also drawn to the screen. I don't think it's appropriate for me to say his name directly. How about this? I'll give him a phone call on set and ask if I can say his name. What do you guys think? If he says no, then you guys can stop making things difficult for me. Tongning smiled as she pulled out her phone and waved it in front of everyone. Okay. The fans replied in unison. So, you really want to connect to him on set? The host had obviously never seen a model as direct as Tongning. She was extremely cooperative with his questions and did not evade his questions at all. Really? Otherwise, even in my dreams, I would dream that fans would chase after me. I'm a little scared. After speaking, she found the name she had changed in advance and made a phone call in front of everyone. On the other end of the phone, Mo Ting was sitting in his car listening to the live broadcast. As soon as he saw Tongning's phone call, he lowered his voice and tried his best to make his voice sound different from the one he had used on High E. Hello? This voice was deeper and more mellow, so it sounded more magnetic and tasteful. At that moment, a terrifying scream erupted from the scene. Tongning made a shushing gesture and asked, "My name is Tongning. It's like this. After the commercial we filmed, the entire nation wants to know who you are. Are you willing to reveal your true identity?" On the other side of the phone, Mo Ting was silent for 2 seconds before asking, "Do you want others to find out my identity?" The moment this question was asked, screams rang out again. This kind of conversation sounded extremely ambiguous. "I want to avoid being chased after by your fans," Tongning replied honestly. In reality, Tongning had purposely not told Mo Ting that she would do this. She wanted to leave the decision in Mo Ting's hands. If Mo Ting admitted to it, she would not run away. You really want to? You two, don't make this kind of ambiguous conversation. Hurry up and get back to the topic at hand. Should we announce this identity or not? Hurry up and make a decision. The host quickly stopped the two. Wasn't this a blatant display of affection? Tongning thought Mo Ting was more willing to reveal his identity. But she never expected. "I won't reveal it," Mo Ting replied straightforwardly. "I'm sorry. I don't want my private life to be exposed too much." Although he wanted to tell everyone that he was Tongning's husband and the CEO of Hyrule, if he actually had the chance to do so, he would feel heartache for all the sacrifices Tongning had made. After all, this wasn't what Tongning truly wanted. She wanted equality. She wanted to shine brightly. Hearing this response, not only did the fans not feel disappointed, they even started to fantasize about this mysterious man. Tongning and I simply collaborated on a simple commercial. I'm already married, so I hope everyone doesn't make things difficult for Tongning. Since the man had already given such an official response, the host couldn't continue to pressure him. So, he simply made a few small requests. "Can you tell us what kind of person Tongning is in your heart? Does she have any little tricks or hobbies that no one knows about?" Tongning had a smile on her face the entire time as she listened nervously to the host's questions. "She is very honest. As for her hobbies, I can't let you guys know about them. Otherwise, I might get beaten up in private." The audience burst into laughter, suddenly alleviating the awkwardness caused by Mo Ting saying he didn't want to reveal his identity. Finally, after Tongning hung up the phone, the host asked, describe your relationship with the Backview Dream Man in one word or one sentence. A lifelong, inseparable, confidant. Tongning revealed one of her relationships with Emoting. In this world, there wouldn't be another person that understood and loved her more than Emoting. Okay then, even though we didn't find out the true identity of the Backview Dream Man today, at least everyone heard his breathtaking voice. I hope everyone can respect his choice. I also have a piece of good news for everyone. LM's full commercial will be released on Monday next week. Everyone can once again lick the screen at his back. The entire interview lasted for 40 minutes. Apart from the sharp questions, there were also questions about life and ideals. Of course, Tongning had always done a good job in this area, so she managed to leave a good impression in front of the audience. By the time the interview ended, it was almost 10 p.m. Just as Tongning was about to leave within Zaheo's protection, the host held her back and said, I've seen plenty of assistants' family members accidentally taken away, but I've never seen anyone act like you. How dare you challenge them in public and force them to return to you? Although you managed to get him, your path will only get more difficult. I know, Tongning was well aware of what was going on. It's rare to see someone as calm as you. After speaking, the host pulled out a business card from his pocket and handed it to Tongning. Right now, what you need is an international stage. I know a few international masters. If you want to go on an international show, give me a call. Tongning was well aware that no matter if it was hitting Li Danny or bringing up Emoting, even though she had tried to salvage the situation in time, it would definitely be used by Lan Shi to create a huge wave. But, since she dared to challenge Lan Shi, there was nothing to be afraid of. Chapter 180. Not long after, Tongning left the television station. However, just as she boarded Emoting's car, she was pulled into a strong embrace and kissed. After getting used to it for a while, she felt the familiar warmth and smell of his body. So, she began to open up and cater to Emoting's kiss. It wasn't until both of them had lost all the air in their chests that Emoting finally stopped. He placed his nose against Tongning's as he whispered in a sexy and raspy voice, "This is the last time. If there is a next time, I will definitely tell the world. You are my Emoting's woman." In the dark, Tongning held onto Emoting's handsome face and smiled. "Whether I say it or not, I will always be your woman, from head to toe, completely intact." Emoting reluctantly let go of her and started driving. Tomorrow, Hai Rue will release a statement explaining what happened at Hai Center tonight. You don't need to worry. Of course I'm not worried. But I don't think Lan Shi will easily believe the relationship between Lu Che and Long Jie. After all, when Long Jie's grandfather was kidnapped, Long Jie did not make use of Lu Che's background. Also, tonight, I took the risk of connecting with you live and giving you a chance to admit that you are my family. If you didn't take advantage of it, others might have realized that the voice you heard at Hai Center was extremely similar to the voice you heard in Fengkai. Are you blaming me? Emoting couldn't help but laugh. Yes, I am. You know, I was already mentally prepared to admit to the world that he was my husband. You weren't mentally prepared because you trusted me and didn't want to say it out loud. Emoting glanced at Tongning and exposed her thoughts. But I am still very happy. My wife, who seems to have nothing to do with the world, finally has the pride to show off to others that she is my husband. Sorry, Mrs. Emo. I didn't let you become famous overnight. Tongning couldn't help but let out a gentle laugh as she leaned her head against Emoting's body. I'm going to treat you like an audience. Do you know what I want to say to the audience the most right now? Emoting is mine. I will dote on him, love him, take care of him and understand him for the rest of his life. None of you should even think about it. Emoting tilted his head slightly as he paid attention to the road. At the same time, he looked into Tongning's eyes. Her amber eyes seemed to glow under the dim lights. Because, in this relationship, she had never treated herself as the weaker party. She never felt that it was normal for her to be doted on and pampered. She simply loved Emoting as much as he loved her. Even if he had to exhaust all of his strength, he wouldn't hesitate. In the past 32 years, This was the first time Imo Ting had experienced what it meant to be doted on. I saw it. Tongning is going around flirting with people. Previously, she had one at home, and now she's involved with a married man. Luo Hao and Lan Shi watched Feng Kai's live broadcast multiple times, but she has never admitted to a relationship with a man. Lan Shi stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out. There was a sinister look on her face, but we don't have any concrete evidence. She is, after all, an artist of Chengtian. It's easier for us to follow her than the paparazzi. As long as she has a guilty conscience, it's only a matter of time before she gets caught. So, right now, we have two things to follow. Firstly, we need to find out if Long Jie and Lu Che's relationship is real, and if Tongning has anything to do with Hai Rue. Secondly, we need to find out who Tongning's man is and expose her relationship. She has never admitted to having a boyfriend before, but it turns out her private life is so messy. Luo Hao let Tongning attend JK's opening show at London Fashion Week. Only by lowering her guard will we have a chance to take advantage of it. If nothing had happened to Danny, this show would have been Danny's, Luo Hao said regretfully. Tomorrow, I will find some time to visit Danny. Lan Shi's lips twitched. Originally, she wanted to say something, but Nzaheo suddenly gave her a phone call. Lan Shi picked up the phone. Nzaheo simply said, President Lan, we are here to take Long Jie's grandfather home. You don't need to take care of him. Lan Shi sneered as she hung up the phone. She then instructed Luo Hao, go release him. Go release him. These three simple words displayed Lan Shi's endless disdain and anger. But Tongning has already gone this far. How can I not release him? She was the almighty CEO of Chengtian, yet she was being forced by a mere model to take a step back and suffer at every turn. Luo Hao glared at Lan Shi before turning around and leaving the office. He then drove Long Jie's grandfather out of his villa. However, before returning the old man to Long Jie, Luo Hao said to him, for the sake of fame and fortune, your granddaughter is willing to be a kept woman and be a mistress. Old man, you need to be careful and stop her. The old man was so angry that his face turned green. Afterwards, Luo Hao drove the old man to Chengtian Entertainment. Tongning, Nzaheo and Long Jie were all waiting in the waiting room. As their eyes met, Luo Hao's voice was extremely cold. I've already sent him back unharmed. Is President Lan in a good mood? Tongning asked Luo Hao with a deeper meaning. What do you think? Don't step on my bottom line again, Tongning simply told Luo Hao. Although Luo Hao's expression was gloomy, he did not say anything sarcastic. He simply told Tongning, get ready to go to London for JK's opening show. You have been lacking international resources. Now that you've gotten rid of Li Danny, the best resources will naturally belong to you and Hua Yuan. After hearing Luo Hao's words, Tongning felt a little sarcastic. How could Lan Shi still think of giving her resources? I will follow up with the progress, Nzaheo immediately said to Luo Hao. Luo Hao scoffed as he turned around and boarded his car. Tongning watched as Luo Hao disappeared into the distance and suddenly said to Nzaheo, although I can anger Lan Shi, I can't shake her foundation, but you destroyed Li Danny. At least, Chengtian will be set back a few years. It's not easy for Lan Shi to train a model, Nzaheo replied. In that case, why is Lan Shi being so generous and allowing me to appear on the international runway? It's not for you to get what you want. Nzaheo had completely forgotten about the fact that Lan Shi was once his friend. Tongning turned her head and glanced at Nzaheo without saying another word. Meanwhile, Long Jie immediately ran over to hug her only relative. Grandfather, are you okay? Grandfather Long was stunned for a moment before pushing Long Jie away. His expression was complicated and sad. Xiao man, grandfather wants to talk to you in private. Let's go. I'll take you home. Nzaheo opened the door of the nanny van and allowed the three of them to board. As the nanny van passed by Hyatt Regency first, Tongning was allowed to step out first. Nzaheo escorted the two to the front door of the apartment. At this time, he happened to bump into Lu Che appearing outside Long Jie's apartment in the middle of the night. It seemed he was deliberately waiting for Long Jie to return. Chapter 181. As soon as Grandfather Long looked at Lu Che, he was reminded of Luo Hao's words. He looked unhappy as he questioned Lu Che impolitely. "Young man, don't you think it's inconvenient for you to be waiting outside my granddaughter's building in the middle of the night?" Lu Che didn't understand why Grandfather Long was hostile towards him, so he immediately explained, "I heard that Long Jie was going to pick you up, so I came over to see if you needed any help." "No need, please go home." Long Jie smiled awkwardly at Lu Che. She didn't know what was wrong with her grandfather. Of course, Lu Che couldn't stay any longer. After saying good night, he quickly drove away from the two. "Long man, tell me honestly, are you entangled with this man?" "Grandfather, what are you talking about? Mr. Luo told me that you are a mistress," Grandfather Long said as he pointed to Long Jie's nose. "From now on, don't ever see that man again." Long Jie was a little confused. At the same time, she was a little angry. She never expected Luo Hao to be so despicable. "And your employer, Tongning, President Lan, is such a good woman. Why did you bully her and go against her?" "Grandfather, did you know that you were placed under house arrest by President Lan? President Lan used you to threaten me and frame Tongning? Tongning was the one who thought of a way to save you." Long Jie explained anxiously. "House arrest? I think there's something wrong with your brain. President Lan takes good care of me and even takes me everywhere to have fun. You didn't even think about this." Long Jie. All of a sudden, she didn't know how to explain the deception in the entertainment industry. She was just very helpless. The elderly were too easily biased, using the false information they got from outsiders to hurt their loved ones. After taking care of her grandfather and putting him to bed, Long Jie gave Lu Che a phone call and said apologetically, "Sorry, my grandfather's attitude wasn't good today. Over the past few days, Lan Shi and Luo Hao have instilled a lot of nonsense into his mind. Right now, he has a lot of opinions about me." "As long as you're okay," Lu Che replied nonchalantly. On the other side of the phone, Lu Che replied nonchalantly, "I'm playing games right now. Rest early." "Okay, good night." Lu Che's attitude made Long Jie feel uneasy. But what did it have to do with her? In any case, Lu Che would never like her. Actually, after hanging up the phone, Lu Che was just as distracted. He couldn't say that he hadn't been splashed with cold water by Grandfather Long. He was simply being nice, but he never expected it would cause such a misunderstanding. There was a strange feeling in his heart. It seemed to be a little different from his usual bad mood. Late at night, after a bath, Tongning immediately snuggled into Imo Ting's warm embrace. She then rested her head on his arm and said, "This doesn't seem like Lan Shi's style. How could she give me an international show? I thought she wanted to rip me to shreds." However, JK's show was truly too tempting for me. Imo Ting hugged Tongning and wrapped his strong legs around her, trapping her soft body in his embrace. "If she gives it to you, just take it." Imo Ting knew, no matter what Lan Shi did, she would only push Tongning into Hai Rue's embrace. Of course, Tongning was well aware of this. "Then, London, England, will you accompany me?" "When?" Imo Ting asked. Tongning thought for a moment before replying, "I think we'll depart next Wednesday. It's nearing the end of the year, so there are more awards ceremonies and gatherings. It's okay if you can't go," Tongning said in a quiet voice. "Actually, every time we go to a country, you always have to do a lot of preparation work. I feel bad just looking at it. This time, I will be in England for a week. You should stay in Beijing and not tire yourself out." Imo Ting did not say a word, but it didn't mean he didn't have any thoughts. But if Imo Ting didn't go, what would Lan Shi's paparazzi do? Wouldn't his hopes be dashed? The next morning, People Vanguard Daily published an article about Li Danny's blacklisting at Hai Fashion Week. As Hai Rue had embellished the story, the media focused on how Li Danny humiliated Tongning's manager, Long Jie. They described how Li Danny framed, slapped, humiliated, and even forced Long Jie to kneel down. With this as the backdrop, Tongning retaliated. The most shocking thing was, Hai Rue pointed out that Tongning's assistant, Long Man, and the CEO's assistant, Lu Che, were engaged, and Lu Che had a reason for saving the day. Tongning and the CEO of Hai Rue, Imo Ting, did not have a special relationship. They were just friends, so there was no need to explain it to the public. To protect their employees, Hai Rui decided to reveal the truth and let the public judge for themselves. Meanwhile, the clothing brand that was affected by Li Danny stepped out and announced that they had used the wrong people. Because of Li Danny's character, they decided to blacklist her forever. Of course, although the majority of netizens expressed their understanding towards Tongning's actions, it also created a serious problem for Tongning. Who would have thought the normally quiet Tongning would have such a side to her? 5 slaps in a row, how satisfying. Tongning must have reached the end of her tolerance. That's why she retaliated like this. I think she's very cool. I've met many celebrities and seen people treat their assistants like humans, but I've never seen someone so protective. Let's not talk too much. I can only describe her in one word: cool. But Tongning also hits people. Her actions are no different than Li Danny's. Mother above, that's because she hasn't been able to bully your loved one. Otherwise, you would have blown her up for everyone to see. I'm the only one that doesn't understand. Why is Tongning's assistant being ordered around by Li Danny like a servant? Without the approval of the higher-ups, there shouldn't be a fight like this, right? Are you guys still discussing it? Today is Monday. LM's official commercial has already been released. Hurry up and lick the screen. At the same time, Tongning's ratings for Feng Kai were released. Her popularity was almost on par with the Best Actress. After LM's commercial was released, the number of views increased rapidly. In just one day, it had reached over 10 million. Regardless of everything else, Tongning had temporarily gained a foothold in Beijing. At least, in terms of popularity and topics of discussion, there was no need to worry about her disappearing from the public eye for a short period of time. This was originally something worth celebrating for Changtian Entertainment. Although Li Danny had unfortunately fallen into the hands of her own people, Tongning's momentum was still very strong. If things continued like this, it was only a matter of time before she overtook Li Danny. In just 3 months, Tongning was like a hot knife through butter. Everyone in the industry was shocked. Of course, it also made many jealous. Chapter 182. This made Lan Shi realize the hidden value of Tongning. So, she wanted to grab hold of Tongning's weakness so she could control her in the future. The day before their trip to England, Long Jie complained to Tongning, "Recently, I've noticed someone has been following me." Tongning furrowed her brows. She knew exactly why Long Jie felt this way. Lan Shi had always suspected that her and Lu Che's engagement was fake. "It's been so many days. Have you not seen Lu Che at all?" Tongning asked. "That day was the day we picked Grandpa up. Lu Che was kind enough to wait downstairs in the middle of winter to see if we were safe. But Grandpa believed Luo Hao, that bitch, and said that I was Lu Che's mistress. Now, Grandpa refuses to go home and keeps an eye on me." Long Jie, the main reason I asked Lu Che to announce that he and you are engaged, apart from protecting Ting and I, is so that you can be protected. If you think this is a problem, Tongning said, it's not a problem. In fact, I'm afraid Lu Che will be at a disadvantage. Long Jie waved her hand. Then, what if I asked the two of you to pretend to live together? Huh, it's just an act. The reason Tongning mentioned this was because she felt Long Jie had feelings for Lu Che, so she wanted to give the two of them a chance. I don't think that's a good idea. Long Jie's cheeks turned red. The two of you are engaged. It's perfectly normal. Hearing this, Long Jie was speechless. She quickly waved her hands. Tongning, don't do this. Otherwise, it will be even more awkward when I see Lu Che in the future. I truly treat Lu Che as a friend. If you want me to put on an act, I can cooperate. But pretending to live together is a bit too much. Tongning was in the middle of packing her luggage. After hearing Long Jie's explanation, she nodded her head. Don't blame me for not giving you a chance. What are you thinking? Lu Che is younger than me. Long Jie acted like she had heard something unbelievable. Long Jie acted like she had heard something unbelievable. In reality, the more flustered she acted, the more it proved that she had her own thoughts. She simply felt the difference between them was too big, so that was why she felt inferior. One day, I'll ask Lu Che what type of girl he likes. Hey, Big Boss won't be accompanying you this time? Long Jie purposely changed the topic to avoid the awkwardness. Tongning thought about the pile of invitations on Imo Ting's desk and shook her head. It's almost the end of the year, and there are more activities. I don't want him to be so tired. Also, in order to prevent him from following us, I brought the flight forward. Don't forget. Don't worry, I've packed everything. Long Jie finally let out a sigh of relief that Tongning no longer had to worry about her relationship with Lu Che. Not to mention the fact that she was almost 30 years old, didn't have a high education, and had no achievements in anything. Most importantly, she loved to eat. She didn't think that an elite like Lu Che would be interested in her. Sometimes, it was true that she had the urge to pursue beautiful things. However, even though she knew that there was a gap between them, she still had to go for it. She felt that she had already passed the age of persistence. Not long after Long Jie left Hyatt Regency, Lu Che brought over a plate of seafood sashimi from Japan. Seeing Tongning alone in the living room, his expression darkened. Wasn't Long Jie here a moment ago? Why did she leave? Tongning looked at the seafood sashimi. It was obviously not something that a nutritious person like her would eat. So, she smiled at Lu Che. She just returned home. Why don't you chase after her? Forget it then, Lu Che replied. Lu Che, can you tell me the truth? Do you feel towards Long Jie? Lu Che interrupted awkwardly before Tongning could finish her sentence. He then looked down at his shiny leather shoes and replied, Actually, I just felt sorry for her when I saw her being bullied. Just sorry? What else could it be? Tongning lowered her head helplessly. She already knew that Lu Che's EQ wasn't that high, but it was too low. It's fine. I can't eat any of this. You can give it to Long Jie. What if her grandfather misunderstands? It's fine. After speaking, Lu Che turned and left Hyatt Regency, leaving Tongning staring blankly at the fresh seafood feast. After finishing his work, Mo Ting came out of the study room. Seeing Tongning's helpless expression, he couldn't help but approach her from behind and hug her. What's wrong? You don't like to eat this either, Tongning replied as she pulled out her phone and gave Long Jie a phone call. Lu Che sent some seafood over by air. Do you want to bring it home to try? Long Jie had just returned home. Her focus wasn't on the seafood, but on Lu Che. She realized she couldn't help but feel tempted. But, after holding it in for a while, she still felt it wasn't right. So she rejected. Forget it, I'm already home. I can't eat it, and Ting doesn't like it either. It won't be fresh overnight. Otherwise, I would have to throw it away. Don't throw it away. I'll be right there. Long Jie quickly changed her clothes and returned to Hyatt Regency. She packed up all the seafood that Lu Che had sent and took it home. However, she didn't take it out to eat. Instead, she placed it in the fridge as if she had a crush on him. When you have a crush on someone, even if they were to give you a normal piece of tissue, you would treasure it and keep it so that you could dry it and turn it into a specimen. After having a shower, Tongning lay in bed thinking about Long Jie and Lu Che. Suddenly, she felt a cold sensation on her chest. It turned out, Imo Ting had undone her robe and his warm hands slid down to her waist and wrapped around her. Tongning looked at Imo Ting with misty eyes. She was a little flustered, but of course, she was also a little expectant. Since you're going to be gone for so long, shouldn't you compensate me in advance? In reality, Tongning didn't actually need Imo Ting's help. Tongning's desire for him was already the same. As long as two people were serious about each other, even a simple glance was enough to trigger an intense tsunami. Soon, the two robes were undone and scattered on the big white bed. Their bodies were pressed tightly against each other, their sweat intertwined, and their hands were intertwined. This made the love seem especially intense in the dark, and it made one's face blush and heart race. Neither of them liked to talk, so Imo Ting was more familiar with Tongning's moans and breaths, especially when she couldn't help but bite his shoulder when they were aroused. Imo Ting couldn't help but fall deeply in love with the woman in his arms from head to toe. He wanted to blend in with her like this until the end of time. But the thing that made Tongning's heart flutter the most was, no matter what Imo Ting demanded, no matter how embarrassing they were after falling from the clouds, he would always pull her into his embrace. Chapter 183. He hugged her tightly. There was no expression or comfort, but the action of a tight hug was better than 1,000 words. A moment later, Ting suddenly sat up with Tongning in his arms. Just as he was about to get off the bed, Tongning held him back. Ting was confused. Tongning was like a shameless doll as she leaned into Ting's embrace. Ting turned on the bedside lamp and gently stroked Tongning's back with a slight smile. "Aren't you going to shower? I just want you to hug me like this." Tongning buried her head into Ting's chest. "I don't want to be separated from you. Didn't you refuse to let me go to England with you? I just don't want you to be too tired. You just don't want me to be too tired." In reality, both of them were well aware of this. But for Ting, who had slowly turned doting on his wife into his career, how could he possibly let her stay in London on her own? But he did not tell Tongning. He simply waited to give his wife another surprise. That night, the two of them couldn't sleep. They hugged each other and chatted until dawn. Not long after, Zaheo and Longjie arrived at Hyatt Regency to pick Tongning up. However, before they left, Tongning still clung onto Ting. "Wait for me." Ting stretched out his hand and stroked Tongning's long hair. The wedding ring between his fingers shone brightly under the sunlight. After arriving at the airport, Longjie suddenly realized she had forgotten to bring her passport. However, grandfather was definitely taking a walk at this time, and there was no way she could go back the way she came. There was no time. Tongning remembered her old apartment wasn't too far from Hairue, so she asked Longjie to give Lu Che a phone call. She knew Longjie had a habit of hiding her keys. Longjie hesitated for a moment. In the end, work was more important. So, she bit the bullet and gave Lu Che a phone call. "Lu Che? What happened?" I forgot to take my passport. Can you come to my house? The house key is hidden in the mailbox at the door. The passport should still be on the bed." Originally, Lu Che didn't have time. Ting still had a lot of documents waiting for him to deliver. If it was anyone else, he would have told them to leave. But it was Longjie. No matter how troublesome it was, he couldn't refuse it. "Just you wait." Lu Che was actually more aware of the boarding time than the others, so he immediately drove over to Longjie's apartment and successfully found the key. Actually, the furnishings in the house were pretty much the same as when Tongning left. This wasn't Lu Che's first time here, but without Longjie around, he felt a little nervous. He pushed open the door and entered Longjie's room. The passport was indeed on the bed, but there was also a pile of bras and panties that Longjie hadn't had time to tidy up. Lu Che's face turned slightly red as he grabbed his passport and left. In his heart, only things that belonged to his future wife could be looked at in such a way. However, because he was in too much of a rush, Lu Che bumped into a chair, causing him to groan in pain. Even when he arrived at the airport, he was still limping. However, he pretended to be calm. "Sorry for making you come all the way here. I'm fine." Lu Che took out his passport and leaned against the car door, pretending to be cool. "Have a safe journey." Longjie was in a hurry, so she didn't notice Lu Che's expression as she rushed into the airport. As for Lu Che, he waited until she was far away before lifting up his trousers to take a look. The skin on his left knee had been scraped off. What an idiot. Of course, there were even more idiots. Because the airport departure lounge was on the second floor, Tongning and Zaheo could see Lu Che's reaction from downstairs. "I bet the collision was pretty bad." And Zaheo teased Lu Che as he sipped on his coffee. Two blockheads bumping into each other. "There's going to be a good show to watch." Tongning laughed. But wasn't love supposed to turn someone into an idiot and make them do stupid things for each other? Thinking about it, it was quite sweet. Because she was worried about bumping into fans, Tongning didn't dare to walk around casually. But, to her surprise, she once again saw the tall and skinny man. It was the reporter from Huarong that bumped into Ting, dropping her off at the airport. Tongning's memory had always been good, especially when it came to people with bad intentions. She was able to quickly remember their gaze and analyze their intentions. This time, The man was polite as he handed her his business card. "Miss Tang, do you still remember me?" "A reporter from Huarong," Tongning blurted out. The man was a little surprised that Tongning could accurately identify his agency without looking at his business card. But it only lasted for a moment before he recovered his smile. "I didn't expect to bump into you here. Are you attending the London fashion show?" Tongning nodded her head politely. "Are you not here with your previous boyfriend?" The man scanned Tongning's surroundings. After confirming there was no one suspicious, he let her off the hook. "In that case, I'll see you in London." "What's this all about?" And Zihao immediately asked. "What do you mean by previous boyfriend?" "Last time, when Hai Rui was in trouble, I accompanied Imo Ting overseas. This reporter saw me getting out of Imo Ting's car, but he had no idea it was Imo Ting," Tongning explained. "I'm afraid we won't have a good week in London. Someone is going to have their eyes on us." "What are you afraid of?" "President Imo didn't come with us." And Zihao tried to calm Tongning down. Compared to this reporter, he was more worried about Lan Shi playing some tricks. Of course, Tongning would have never imagined that a small studio like this would end up entangling with her. Has Tongning already set off for London? Lan Shi asked Luo Hao, who was pacing back and forth in Chung Tian Entertainment's office. "She should be on a plane right now," Luo Hao replied. "Have you already made arrangements in London?" "This time, we found a famous Korean paparazzi. If Tongning does anything suspicious, it will be impossible for her to escape their cameras," Luo Hao said as he twirled his fingers. He had a calm and arrogant expression on his face. He had always been the epitome of a hypocrite. Everyone knew this. Give them all the privileges they want, until they find what we are looking for. Lan Shi yelled before turning to Luo Hao. "We need to find a few more newcomers to train. I don't feel comfortable with only Hua Yuan." By the time Tongning and her entourage arrived in London, it was noon in the UK. As Tongning boarded her car, she glanced at the reporter from Huarong. This man was very strange. He was not one of the clingy paparazzi, but he exuded a dangerous aura. Tongning made sure she was on guard against him and did not throw his business card into the bin. Tongning received a phone call from Imo Ting 10 minutes after she landed. After checking in with her husband that she was safe, she decided to check in at the hotel arranged by the agency. "JK's show is in 2 days. We need to go for an interview first. Although Chung Tian recommended you to be the opening act, we can't confirm it yet. You can make the arrangements. Tongning, what do you think of Lan Shi forgetting to give you resources?" And Zihao had always wanted to know. Chapter 184. JK is a top fashion brand. Why would I reject them? But since she gave me such a great resource, I'm sure the thing she wants won't be simple. I will be careful, and Zihao replied. "Hurry and get used to your jet lag. You have a lot of work ahead of you." After Zihao left, Tongning lay in bed and closed her eyes. She should have been exhausted, but her mind was becoming more and more awake. This was because they were on an international runway. It was completely different to the small shows she had previously attended. If she could really walk on JK's runway, she would definitely be able to grab hold of more international resources. But between her and Imo Ting, it seemed there was only one step between them. Perhaps it was because their minds were connected. Imo Ting unexpectedly gave her another phone call. Tongning held on to her phone and couldn't help but laugh. "How did you know I was thinking about you?" It was already nighttime in Beijing. After returning home and not seeing any familiar figures, Imo Ting naturally thought Tongning wasn't a noisy person, but he felt the house was cold and empty. Without her around, he wasn't used to it. "Mrs. Imo, if you are really gone for a week, my body and mind will be tormented. I want to see you right now. I want to hug you and kiss you." Being in a foreign country and lying on a completely unfamiliar bed, Tongning was the one who was truly tormented. "But, President Mo, from tonight onwards, I have a lot of work to do. I will have to endure for now." Endure? He never intended to endure. So, as Imo Ting coaxed Tongning to sleep, he sent Lu Che a message telling him to book a plane ticket to London. However, after a quick meeting with Tongning, he immediately flew back to Beijing. He had an important banquet that night. After receiving Mo Ting's message, Lu Che wondered if it was really necessary for Mo Ting to fly for 20 hours just to see Tongning. Ting, wait for me. Soon, I will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Hearing Tongning's words, Mo Ting's heart was moved. So what if he had to fly for 20 hours? He had already said, as long as Tongning wanted to do something, he would accompany her. Even if it was just a quick meeting was good enough. 6 p.m., Tongning and Zaheo arrived at JK's show venue. The venue was located in a large church on the outskirts of London. JK's main theme for this episode was soul and rebirth. All of the costumes were mainly black and white, with black datura flowers, black and white wings, and other elements that represented darkness and light completely integrated into the costumes. It was as though the two extremes of life were pulling at each other. Now that she was at the international fashion show, it was rare to see such chaotic scenes. In the spacious backstage, there were only models changing and applying makeup. This made Tongning feel like she had returned to her 19-year-old self in France. While Zaheo was communicating with JK, Tongning was in the backstage trying on her makeup. At such a high-class fashion show, apart from her, there were no other Asian faces. After all, there weren't many Asian models that were qualified to appear in such a high-class fashion show. Tongning stood in front of the mirror. From head to toe, she was only wearing a pair of black underwear. This was the norm for a model. At this moment, all she had to do was stretch out her arms, and someone would put on the clothes that the designer was satisfied with. JK's designer was a 40-something-year-old man. He could be considered half a Beijinger. With a full beard, his entire body was filled with an artistic aura. As he scanned Tongning from head to toe, he realized her legs were so beautiful that it was impossible to ignore them. So, with a snap of his fingers, he instructed his assistant to bring over his finale outfit for Tongning to try on. It was a deep V black dress. The body of the dress was made from a translucent black chiffon with black web-like threads intertwining with each other. It was like a trapped soul. On her left shoulder, there was a blooming black datura flower that extended from her shoulder to her lower abdomen. The darkness, the evil, the struggle. As soon as Tongning put it on, the aura she gave off was like an evil force that had been trapped for a long time. It was about to break free and regain its freedom. This is the feeling of evil breaking free. Okay, very good. You will be the finale. What was originally supposed to be an opening had become the finale. This was completely unexpected for Tongning. But what was even more unexpected was, JK's show had to be paired up with a male model. In order to get the order right, they had to walk in advance. It was only when Tongning stepped onto the stage that she saw the man for the first time. He was a 1.9 tall supermodel. He was young, handsome, and looked to be in his early 20s. He had a pair of deep blue eyes that were filled with charisma and confidence. However, just as Tongning brushed shoulders with him, he suddenly stretched out his hand and took the opportunity to pinch Tongning's thigh. Tongning turned her head and looked at him coldly. She was trying to warn him. Sorry, your legs are too beautiful. I really want to kiss them, the man said straightforwardly. If you continue to act like this, I will think this is how British people are raised, Tongning warned. After speaking, she separated from the male model. The young model did not care as he continued to smile foolishly at Tongning. After walking in, Tongning stepped off the stage. And Zaheo immediately handed her a jacket and helped her put it on. What just happened? What happened to that male model? Nothing. Tongning simply assumed the man was confused. Actually, at a show like this, it was common for someone to touch someone and then take the opportunity to hug someone else. Especially backstage. Anything could be seen. Tongning put on her jacket and prepared to return backstage with Zaheo. But, because she was very sensitive to cameras, she noticed an unusual flash of light coming from a corner. It looks like someone is secretly taking photos, Tongning said to Zaheo. Zaheo glanced at Tongning and followed her gaze to the corner. He then patted her on the shoulder. Go get changed backstage first. Leave this to me. Tongning nodded her head. She had a rough guess, so she did not immediately head backstage. Instead, she watched as Zaheo walked towards a corner of the church. A moment later, a black shadow appeared from under the chair. Perhaps it was because the shadow was too professional and had become used to escaping, and Zaheo did not manage to catch it. Forget it, there are plenty of people out there that spy on design secrets. It may not be directed at me. Perhaps I am overthinking things. And Zaheo returned to Tongning's side and shielded her. I will be more careful. Let's go get changed first. However, they had no idea that this was one of the South Korean paparazzi that Luo Hao had sent. After escaping from the church, he held onto his camera and smiled proudly. His luck was not bad. He managed to capture a photo of Tongning flirting with a male model. The scene of them touching each other's legs was captured in high definition. It didn't take long before Luo Hao, who was back in China, received a photo from the paparazzi. This was only the first day, yet Tongning, by the time she returned because she thought she could be gilded, she would find that her name had become infamous. Chapter 185. In reality, the reporter from Huarong Studio was also present at the show. He had been searching for an artist that could make him famous. Tongning had always been known for keeping a low profile, but ever since he saw her say goodbye to a man intimately in the US, she had left a deep impression on him. So, this time in London, he was confident he would be able to capture an intimate photo of her with the man and obtain evidence. Of course, he was disdainful of the paparazzi who kept snapping photos of Tongning. Material like this was only used for low-level hype. Only low-level hype would be used. What he wanted to capture was evidence of Tongning being intimate with a man. So, his hotel room was located opposite Tongning's. November in London wasn't as cold as Beijing. A simple trench coat was enough to keep out the cold. On the way back to the hotel, Tongning closed her eyes and took a nap. Long Jia knelt in front of her and gave her a massage. Her heart ached as she pinched her calves. Due to wearing high heels for a long time, Tongning's leg muscles were tight. As they entered the hotel's underground car park, and Zaheo was the first to step out of the car. As soon as he saw Mo Ting, dressed in a black trench coat, leaning against his sports car, he couldn't help but be stunned. Tongning had already fallen asleep. Long Jia jumped out of the car and was about to wake her up when Mo Ting gestured for her to be quiet. He then bent over and carried Tongning out of the back seat. He let her lean firmly in his arms. This hotel isn't safe. I will take her to the manor. And Zaheo nodded his head and reminded, you need to start work at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Come pick her up tomorrow morning. I will send the address to you. After speaking, Mo Ting placed Tongning in his sports car and sped away. And Zaheo thought back to Mo Ting's words about the hotel not being safe and the paparazzi at the church today. As a manager, he didn't want to think too much about it. But he knew she was definitely capable of doing something like this. He thought back to the time he was intimate with Yoon Xian and the Shadow in the Shadows. He thought back to the past that he had long sealed away. He really didn't want Yoon Xian's death to have anything to do with Lan Shi. The Maybach sped along and stopped at a manor. As it was a private property, the security system was top-notch. Mo Ting unbuckled his seatbelt and looked at Tongning, at the woman that he missed every minute of separation. They only had 2 hours to see each other, yet she chose to sleep alone. But Mo Ting didn't want to wake her up. He simply hugged her and hugged her. Even if it was just a whiff of her scent, he was satisfied. However, before her exhaustion from wearing high heels for a long period of time on a plane and walking on the runway had subsided, her leg suddenly cramped up. She opened her eyes in pain and bumped into Mo Ting's chest. Tongning was stunned. She almost thought she was dreaming. A moment later, Mo Ting released her from his embrace and lifted her legs onto his knees. With a pair of strong hands, he gently held onto her calves. Why are you here? I'll charge it, Mo Ting replied. Tongning happily stretched out her arms and hugged Mo Ting. To her, Mo Ting was like air to her. You only have 2 hours. What do you want to do? Mo Ting asked as he gently patted her back. We can only see each other for 2 hours. Why did you come? Tongning patted him on the shoulder helplessly. It's a 20-hour flight, and we still have to cross the ocean. As long as I can hug you for 2 seconds, these 20 hours will be worth it. So, even you know how to do things like this. Tongning turned her head and placed a kiss on Imoting's earlobe. She then moved her lips to his. However, Imoting did not move an inch. He did not have the slightest reaction. If you don't want it, then forget it. Imoting didn't wait for Tongning to retreat as he held onto her cheeks and passionately planted a passionate kiss on her face without holding anything back. Tongning did not return to the hotel. This was what the paparazzi in England told Lan Shi and Luo Hao. The two were still in Chung Tian's office late at night. They looked at each other and asked, "Did you find out where she went?" "We were afraid of being exposed, so we didn't dare to follow her closely. We simply noticed the lights in her room were off, so we became suspicious. Continue to keep an eye out. If you see any evidence, don't miss it." Lan Shi hung up the video call and turned to ask Luo Hao, "What do you think Tongning is doing at a time like this? What else could she be doing? If she's not in her room, apart from fooling around with a man, is there any reason for her to go out?" "There's no use talking. You need to get a photo." After seeing photos of Tongning flirting with a model, they were confident in this Korean paparazzi. The reporters from Hwarong Studio also noticed something was amiss. Tongning did not return to the hotel. And Zaheo and Long Jie's rooms were lit up. Only Tongning's room was unresponsive. He immediately thought back to the day at the airport in the U.S. There were so many hotels, he might as well wait at the airport. Perhaps God would give him a pleasant surprise. Time passed slowly while they were at work, but as long as they were together, time seemed to pass by in the blink of an eye. This was a short and hard-earned 2 hours. The couple did not go anywhere. They simply kissed and hugged in the car. Not a second was wasted. There are at least 4 paparazzi staying at the hotel booked by Chung Tian. Before you returned, I spoke to the manager of the hotel and looked at the surveillance footage. These 4 people are following the same path as you. Imoting explained to Tongning before he left. The hotel was booked by Chung Tian, so of course he couldn't let it go. So, the first thing he needed to do was to check the hotel's safety. After listening to Imoting, Tongning told him everything that happened at the church. "I've already asked Lu Che to investigate their background. Don't be afraid." Tongning let out a gentle laugh as she shook her head. "I'm not afraid. I just need to find out if they were sent by the media or by Chung Tian, even though I'm not sure what Lan Shi's motive is." Imoting ran his hand through Tongning's hair without saying a word. He was secretly opening Hai Rue's doors for Tongning. "It can't be anything good. Be careful. It's still early to work. Go to the manor and get some sleep." "I'll send you to the airport," Tongning replied. Imoting held onto her shoulder and shook his head. "Do you want to see how tired you look? Be a good girl. As soon as I have time, I will fly over." Tongning did not insist. She simply placed her forehead against Imoting's and enjoyed the last bit of intimacy. So, Imoting came and left on his own. Hwarong's reporter had been waiting at the airport the entire time. As soon as he saw the sunglasses wearing Imoting, he had no idea that Imoting was the man he wanted to photograph. He simply sighed. The CEO of Hai Rue was indeed a legend. Chapter 186. Lu Che sent over some information. The paparazzi following Tongning were all from South Korea. They were a very professional group. Lu Che also found out that the reason they were sent out was because they had contact with Chung Tian's artist director, Luo Hao. The answer was obvious. And Zaheo's expression did not look good. He suddenly realized a lot of things. Back then, although the incident between him and Yoon Xian was exposed by Yang Jing and Luo Hao, the person that provided the evidence was the shadow that was hiding in the dark. In other words, was it Lan Shi? So many years had passed since the incident with Yoon Xian. Was Lan Shi planning to use the same trick again? After taking Yoon Xian's life, did she want to take Tongning's life as well? I wonder what that group of people managed to capture. I used to really like President Lan. I felt she was capable and generous like a heroine. Yet, She turned out to be such a heartless and unscrupulous person. Long Jie couldn't help but sigh. Tongning sat on the hotel bed, her heart extremely calm. No matter how ruthless Lan Shi was, it couldn't stop her determination to become an international supermodel. Lan Shi was ruthless, but she could actually be even more ruthless than Lan Shi. Seeing Tongning so quiet, and Zaheo was actually a little afraid of her. After spending so much time together, he had a certain understanding of Tongning. She was also a type of silence, but Tongning's calmness was enough to reveal her different state of mind. For example, when she was with Ting, her calmness carried a sense of relaxation. For example, when she was with outsiders, her calmness carried a sense of alienation. For example, at this moment, Tongning's calmness had reached a frightening point. The more she remained silent, the more likely it was that she was thinking of a way to retaliate against Lan Shi. Lan Shi had already gotten to this point. So, Tongning's future was no longer with Cheng Tian. What do you plan to do? What else can I do? I'll let her take as many photos as she wants. Tongning revealed a gentle smile. She didn't seem to care. But, and Zaheo knew, if Lan Shi was the mantis, then Tongning would be the Oriole. Your current mission is to focus on JK's show. No matter how important anything else is, it won't be more important than the show. But, Lan Shi may not be willing to let me appear on the runway. Right now, she is considering whether to use me or destroy me. Tongning's mind was as clear as ever as she lifted her head and looked into Zaheo's eyes. If you were Lan Shi, what would you choose? The problem is that she hasn't captured anything yet. Not necessarily. Tongning was referring to the incident where the male model touched her thigh. As long as Lan Shi wanted to, even if it was a small matter, with careful planning, it could destroy her reputation. Just focus on preparing for the show. As for everything else, I'll handle it. And Zaheo instructed in seriousness. Tongning smiled. She trusted in Zaheo, but not completely. In this world, the only person she could truly trust was Ting. Tongning, I really didn't know you were in such a difficult situation. Is Lan Shi following you like this partly because she's afraid Lu Che and I are just a front for you, and you are the one truly connected to Hairue? Tongning looked at Lan Shi. After hearing this, Tongning shook her head. No. If Lan Shi really suspected that I was having an affair with Hairue, then it wouldn't be hard for her to guess my relationship with Ting. She has never believed that Ting would be interested in me. Why? Because even Ting didn't like her. In her eyes, Ting, who didn't even like her, wouldn't have the time to play around with a small model like me. In reality, deep down, Lan Shi was an arrogant person. She would not allow others to be better than her, nor would she allow others to escape her control. How arrogant. Although Long Jie felt a little better after hearing Tongning's comforting words, Long Jie still felt a little better. But she felt that since Tongning had tried her best to hide her relationship with Ting, it wasn't time to reveal it yet. So, as soon as she returned to her room, she sent Lu Che a message. After sending the message, she felt like her brain had gone numb as she leaned against the wall with a red face. Why don't we move in together? Lu Che was in the middle of handling some documents. As soon as he saw Long Jie's message, he was shocked as he immediately replied with a string of question marks. This person with low EQ thought Long Jie had sent the message to the wrong person. Aren't we an engaged couple? Why don't we pretend to move in together? Since you already have the keys to my house, why don't you drop by from time to time? Is your brain gone numb? Long Jie. Low EQ was a type of illness. After Long Jie and Zaheo returned to their respective rooms, Tongning walked over to her bed and pulled back the curtains to admire the night view of London. In her heart, she thought about how Lan Shi wanted to deal with her and how she would deal with Lan Shi. But if Lan Shi wanted her life. The next morning, Tongning was awoken by a knock on her door. She thought it was either Zaheo or Long Jie. But, as she got changed and opened the door, she was greeted by the young male model from yesterday. I've finally found you, beautiful oriental legs. The man stretched out his arms to give Tongning a hug, but Tongning quickly dodged. My name is Gabby. I really want to meet you. Goddess, you are very sexy. Tongning did not respond as she closed the door and gave Zaheo a phone call. At a time like this, for a man like this to appear, Tongning couldn't help but connect him to the man from Changtian. And Zaheo quickly dealt with the male model and returned to Tongning's room. You are currently being followed, and these random people have suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It is quite suspicious. If even Zaheo had noticed, how could Tongning not know? Lan Shi is really closing in on us. Not only this, Luo Hao, who was even more cunning than Lan Shi, knew deep down that Tongning was not easy to deal with. If he continued to drag things out, she would definitely retaliate. So, Luo Hao did not ask for Lan Shi's permission as he directly posted the photos he had in his hands online. The title was, Tongning's virtuous mask is torn as she flirts with a male model. The article even hinted that he was an insider and knew Tongning had a boyfriend. But, on one hand, she was flirting with the Backview Dream Man, while on the other hand, she was seducing a male model overseas. He couldn't stand to watch any longer. Tongning had always been known for her innocence. Now that there was such a lustful accusation, the netizens immediately joined in the scolding war. Female celebrities were different from male celebrities. Even if a male celebrity had these scandals, they would be quickly buried. But, when it came to a female celebrity, even if they were innocent, they would still be held onto by others. In fact, the media would dig up dirt on them from time to time. Lustful. No one expected this. Luo Hao's actions were too fast and too ruthless, especially when it was related to the word lustful. It was something that men loved to search for. It didn't take long before it became #1 in popularity. However, at this time, Mo Ting had just stepped off the plane. Chapter 187. After seeing the news, Lan Shi's face turned scarlet red. Holding onto an entertainment magazine, she stomped into Luo Hao's office in high heels and threw it in front of him. Why did you make the decision on your own? Luo Hao put down the documents in his hands and stood up from his chair. He then explained to Lan Shi, because, if we wait any longer, Tongning will retaliate. She is a woman that likes to think. With the information we have, it is enough to destroy her. Since that's the case, why should we continue to wait? Lan Shi did not respond. To be exact, she knew Luo Hao was doing the right thing. But, she didn't like people that made decisions on their own. Tongning was currently in the UK. As long as Changtian did not interfere with PR and allowed the scandal to spread, all that awaited Tongning was the hatred and destruction of the netizens. Don't forget, Tongning was even able to walk away from the bed-climbing scandal. This time, I will not let her make a comeback. I have a series of preparations. After speaking, Luo Hao showed Lan Shi the information he had prepared. As long as Tongning dared to refute him, he would hand over a set of information to slap her in the face. He refused to believe that this time, no one would be able to save Tongning. Oh God, I never thought Tongning would appear so aloof on the outside. But on the inside, she is actually so lustful. I previously heard that when she went overseas for work, she never stayed in a hotel arranged by the agency. Where else could she have gone? She must have found someone to satisfy her lust. Didn't she say she doesn't have a boyfriend? Previously, during Feng Kai's interview, I already felt her relationship with the Backview Dream Man was a bit ambiguous. Am I the only one that noticed she seduced a married man? I've already said this bitch has a problem. Yet, a bunch of people praised her for having a high EQ. She's almost been hyped up. Isn't she just a model? Dominating the trending searches all day long. Is that okay? I bet that woman is still lying under a foreign hunk. In an instant, comments attacking Tongning threatened to crash the servers. As for the media outlet that released the news, they had never seen such a high number of reposts before. They couldn't stop laughing. Tell the bitch to stay in London and never come back. After the incident broke out, the media immediately contacted Changtian Entertainment to ask the artist's director if he was aware of Tongning's situation. Luo Hao simply replied, I'm not too sure. After the incident broke out, Changtian Entertainment did not do anything. This gave the public a signal. Chang Tian Entertainment had chosen to be passive towards Tongning's matter. This meant there was indeed a problem with Tongning, and Chang Tian Entertainment had no choice but to give up. The media immediately contacted Zhehao. At this time, Zhehao was watching Tongning's rehearsal. When he received the phone call, he had no idea what was going on. He immediately asked Longjie to do a search on his phone. Longjie did not look too good. As she handed it to Zhehao, her neck was red with anger. Zhehao received the phone and looked at it. He gestured for her to comfort Tongning and not let her see through his act. Right now, the most important thing to her was JK's show. Longjie tried her best to suppress the anger in her heart as she made an okay gesture. Zhehao held onto his phone as he walked out of the venue. Standing outside the church, he gave Lan Shi a phone call. President Lan, you sure have a good plan? Tongning sure is unlucky. After working so hard for so long, in the end, she has been slandered by her own agency. This time, she can be completely blackened. Doesn't that mean your wish has come true? Zhehao, even if you give up on Tongning, there are still thousands of Tangnings out there. She only has herself to blame for her current situation. Don't you know that? Lan Shi scoffed in disdain. If she was a little more obedient and didn't think too much, she would definitely have a bright future ahead of her. Not to mention JK's show, even the best would be hers. Since she has gotten to this point, she can't blame anyone. Zhehao took a deep breath. He suddenly felt Lan Shi was quite pitiful. Tongning simply wanted to pursue her dreams. She didn't get in anyone's way. So, I'm sorry, Lan Shi. Lan Shi could tell there was a hidden meaning in Zhehao's words as her eyebrows slowly furrowed. What do you mean? Zhehao hesitated for a moment before asking, did you also cause Unexion's death? Hearing this question, hearing this name that hadn't been mentioned for a long time, Lan Shi froze for a moment before scoffing. You know better than me how Unexion died. As for Tongning, I want her to never be able to reincarnate. Zhehao felt he had nothing else to say to Lan Shi, so he hung up the phone. However, he did not make this phone call for nothing, because he had recorded it. Afterwards, Zhehao picked up a call from the Beijing media and yelled, none of this is the truth. I hope the media can follow their professional ethics and not insult someone's innocence. Hai Rui's CEO's office. After returning to Beijing, Imo Ting had just sat down when he saw the rumor online. He immediately gave Zhehao a phone call. Imo Ting, don't worry, Tongning doesn't know yet. I have no intention of letting her know in case it affects her JK show. Zhehao reassured. Plus, I have a recording in my hands that proves Lan Shi deliberately defamed Tongning. Take good care of Tongning, don't let her mood be affected. Also, send me the recording, Imo Ting instructed. The Imo Ting at this moment was completely different to how he normally felt when he was with Tongning. It was at this moment that Zhehao realized this Imo Ting was the same Imo Ting that the public was familiar with. He was an absolute king that had the power to rule over everything. I'll send it over right away. Zhehao felt that if he kept the recording in his hands, it wouldn't be as useful as handing it to Imo Ting. So, Zhehao directly sent the recording to Imo Ting. However, he forgot that there was a part of the recording that talked about Unexion's death. Imo Ting received the recording and listened to it once. He then instructed someone to get rid of the part of Unexion and handed it to Lu Che for him to investigate. Put this recording on the most eye-catching headline and place it in the hottest spot for a month. No one is allowed to remove it from the hottest searches. Let's call it, Tongning got defamed because she offended you. A month? Lu Che was a little surprised. Didn't that mean Chang Tian was waiting to be gang-raped? A month. On top of that, get some of the media to extract the single sentence in the recording and find a professional team to create a joke for President Lan. Doesn't she want absolute power? I'll give it to her right now. After speaking, Imo Ting handed his phone to Lu Che. Remember, if anyone wants to buy the rankings, use double the price to suppress them. Put Chang Tian's news on the headlines for a month. Chapter 188. Hey, have you guys seen the recording on the top trending topic? What gossip is it this time? What else could it be? It turns out the CEO of Chungtian Entertainment hired someone to slander Tongning yesterday because she didn't listen to her. Oh God, who does she think she is? Does she think she's a god that rules over others? Another reversal? Netizens quickly clicked open the top trending topic and discovered it was a complete recording. Rumor had it that the voices belonged to Tongning's manager, Enzaheo, and Chungtian CEO, Lan Shi. Plenty of people had seen them before, so they were certain the voices belonged to them. As for the recording, it was Enzaheo questioning Lan Shi about why she wasn't satisfied after she had ruined Tongning's reputation. In response, Lan Shi arrogantly explained that it was because Tongning was disobedient that she decided to take revenge. She didn't even hesitate to destroy her own model. Netizens began to discuss. The entertainment industry was indeed a deep pool. When looking at the truth, one should never look at the surface. Afterwards, Tongning quickly became the weaker party. Especially those that had similar experiences, they immediately expressed their own experiences and expressed their support for Tongning in the comments below the post. Being rich is great, but being rich enough to destroy other people's dreams and lives is completely rubbish. Lan Shi is just the tip of the iceberg. Forgive me for being blunt, but the entertainment industry is a stinking drain that only holds rubbish. Actually, I want to say, who posted this message? Really, it's kind of cool. The reason why Tongning is being slandered is because she has stood in the way of too many people. She is too pure and innocent. The industry loves to associate with evil. Tongning, if you continue to be so innocent, you will be done for. But I will still support you. By the way, did you ask someone to post this on the headlines? If it was, please accept my knees. In less than a day, the tables had turned. Of course, the audience had already gotten used to Tongning being slandered, so they weren't too surprised by the final reversal. But the content that was revealed was still enough for them to discuss excitedly. Meanwhile, night had just fallen. Inside Lan Shi's high-class apartment, she sat on the soft sofa, staring at the headlines of the entertainment news. Her heart was filled with anger. Lan Shi pulled out her phone and gave Luo Hao a phone call, telling him to find someone to deal with it. But Luo Hao told her, "It's no use. If I pay to take down the rankings, the other party will immediately double the price." Did you find out who did this? Lan Shi stood up from the sofa and paced back and forth in the living room. And Zaheo was definitely the one who gave us the recording, but who was behind this powerful and influential person? Who did Zaheo contact? I can't find anything. It could be Zaheo himself, or it could be him and Tongning. Or perhaps Zaheo has found an opponent. Didn't you say it's foolproof? Didn't you say you were going to destroy Tongning's reputation? Who was the one who got beaten up in the end? It's me. Do you know how embarrassed I felt when the higher-ups of Chungtian saw this? I can't wait to find a hole to hide in. Lan Shi said angrily. Because of her emotions, her stomach hurt as she knelt on the floor. And Zaheo has been in the industry for so many years. Even if it's not as easy to build connections as before, finding your enemies is a piece of cake. So, President Lan, removing Zaheo from his position as Tongning's manager cannot be delayed. The first thing Luo Hao thought of was to separate Tongning and Zaheo, but they had never thought that in fact. The person that had been playing them like monkeys behind their backs was Mo Ting. It had always been Mo Ting. Anyway, didn't you plan to poach someone from another agency? According to Zaheo's capabilities, doing something like this is the best way to make use of him. We need to make sure Tongning is isolated and helpless before we can move on to the next step. They had just made a move and they were already beaten up. Yet, they still wanted to move on to the next step. Lan Shi knelt on the sofa and took deep breaths. First, think of a way to remove the headlines. Then, give Zaheo a phone call and ask him to find a new manager. I know what to do. Luo Hao was indeed meticulous and calm. But, sometimes, there were some things that a mere artist-director like him could not change. For example, take Sheng Tian's search results for example. No matter what he did, he couldn't shake them off. London. Tonight, JK's show was about to begin. Over the past 2 days, Tongning had been busy rehearsing, meeting with JK's designers, and trying to gain control of the company's resources. So, she had no idea Beijing was in chaos because of her. Lan Shi and Enzaheo's recording had yet to be removed from the front page of the internet. As a result, Chung Tian had suffered a lot of damage, especially to their reputation. But who was to blame? As soon as Tongning had time, she would call Imo Ting. But Imo Ting did not tell her about this interesting incident. Because of the exposure of the recording, the paparazzi that Lan Shi had previously hired had no choice but to withdraw. But this didn't mean Tongning wasn't in danger. Don't forget, there was still a reporter from Huarong waiting to catch her. Are you nervous? Take a deep breath. Just before the show started, Long Jia asked as she fanned Tongning. Tongning looked at the chaotic backstage with a calm expression. I can't believe it. This time, no one was going to steal her finale and no one was going to argue with her. This was a runway that belonged solely to her. A runway that was purely for the sake of Asian models. You can't believe Lan Shi hasn't come to cause trouble, right? Long Jia smiled. Right now, she can't even take care of herself. How could she have the time to deal with you? What do you mean? Long Jia did not say a word, but she had a meaningful smile on her face. Of course, she did not tell Tongning that there was a person that had once again left work to travel across the ocean just to witness her every beautiful moment. This person was in the audience. Seeing Long Jia did not respond, Tongning did not ask any further. After all, she was going to find out sooner or later. And Zaheo is still on the phone outside. Let me go check on him. The show is about to start. Long Jia was afraid Tongning would ask, so she found an excuse to leave to look for Nzaheo. At this time, Nzaheo was filled with anger and complicated emotions. It was the agency's decision to let you leave Tongning. As long as you are still Chung Tian's manager, you will have to obey our arrangements. On the other end of the phone, Luo Hao said firmly, Of course, you can leave Chung Tian, but Tongning will still be a model. We will find a new manager to follow her, so there is no need for you. If you put more effort into training newcomers, you will have more than just Hua Yuan. Why must you always go against Tongning? And Zaheo couldn't understand. Lan Shi actually wanted to remove him from his position as Tongning's manager. Chapter 189. It's not that we want to go against Tongning, it's that Tongning wants to go against us. The agency is a team, but as the agency's model, when has Tongning ever obeyed Lan Shi's orders? And Zaheo, don't forget, without Chung Tian, there would be no you and there would be no Tongning today. Luo Hao's words were powerful. His tone was filled with arrogance and mockery. No, and Zaheo, you have already lost the right to be a top manager because you betrayed Lan Shi. After hearing Luo Hao's words, Nzaheo's lips curved upwards in mockery. However, his mood was no longer as heavy as before. Luo Hao, whether I have the right or not is not up to you to decide. After all, the position of artist director was given to you by Lan Shi because I gave it up. I seem to understand how to be a manager better than you. Plus, you need to be a person first. As for my position, no one in Chung Tian can replace me. I believe, with my experience and knowledge of Chung Tian's secrets, even if Lan Shi were to choose someone to leave, it would not be me, and Zaheo. After speaking, and Zaheo hung up the phone. He had no intention of taking Lan Shi's orders to heart. However, this conversation was eventually overheard by Long Jia, who had come out to look for Tongning. The show has already started. Do you want to watch? Of course I want to watch. This is Tongning's international runway. What did the international runway represent? His inbox was filled with invitations. The emails that were once in Chinese had all been converted to English. This was before Tongning had even walked on the runway. JK's publicity campaign had already included a mysterious Asian face. The reason why people had faith in Tongning was because of the Oriental trend that she had created in North America. Over the past few years, Oriental elements had become a popular element in the fashion industry. And Zaheo and Long Jia looked at each other. Just as they were about to enter the church, they turned around and saw two Americans, a man and a woman, squatting on the steps and smoking. Originally, this wasn't a big deal, but Nzaheo was sensitive enough to overhear the words Tongning coming from their mouths. How much did you receive from them? Those nouveau riche from the East Shore offered a lot of money. However, I only told Gabby half the amount, and he agreed to push that Asian model down on the runway today. Gabu. Nzaheo remembered this name. It was Tongning's runway partner. He wanted to push Tongning down on the runway? Nzaheo wore a complicated expression on his face. Because, if Tongning fell on the international stage, he knew better than anyone what it meant. It meant that Tongning's international career could very well come to an end. As for why Gabby wanted to frame Tongning for the sake of money, it had to be explained from the current state of the modeling industry. Male models and female models were different. Most male models worked part-time, and only a small number of them were able to make a name for themselves. Their appearance fees could not be compared to those of female models, especially famous models, especially when this male model was not particularly outstanding. Therefore, they couldn't ask for more money. Zaheo, why are you in a daze? Longjia asked. And Zaheo thought for a moment before asking, is President Imo here? He's in the audience. What's wrong? Longjia looked at Nzaheo suspiciously as he strode towards the audience. At this moment, Imo Ting was sitting in a corner of the audience dressed in a dark blue retro suit. Because of his outstanding appearance and noble aura, even amongst the group of fashion celebrities, he had an irresistible charm. Seeing the calm Imo Ting, Nzaheo felt he had found Tongning's backing. So, he quickly walked over and whispered a few words in Imo Ting's ear. Imo Ting's gaze was originally cold and unapproachable, but after hearing Nzaheo's words, his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. Name your price first and negotiate with him, no matter how much it is, Imo Ting replied coldly. As for the debt, we can settle it after the show is over. Nzaheo understood Imo Ting's intentions. At a time like this, using money was the best option. But, was it too late to name a price now? Gabby was indeed Lanxi's backup plan. Even if the South Korean paparazzi returned empty-handed, she was not going to let Tongning get what she wanted. International runway? Did she really think that just because she gave it to you, she was supporting you? Lanxi looked at the exquisite watch on her wrist and revealed a look of mockery. She wanted Tongning to know she could send her to the highest place, but she could also pull her down at any time. Just wait and see how our Asian Tongning will embarrass herself on JK's show at London Fashion Week. Time slowly passed. Below the stage, Imo Ting didn't usually pay attention to things like this. But when it actually happened to Tongning, he couldn't help but feel a little worried. But no one could understand. The way he occasionally touched his earlobe was a sign that he was nervous. JK's show had already begun. Accompanied by soothing classical music, the opening models walked onto the runway from the left and right. Not long after, Nzaheo finally returned to Imo Ting's side. He lowered his head in front of Imo Ting, indicating he had completed his task. But, even so, Imo Ting did not have much trust in the Americans. Did you warn Tongning? I'm not sure if Longjia has found Tongning yet. Imo Ting remained silent for a moment without saying another word. He had already done everything he could. If he continued to put in more effort, it would only affect Tongning's show. I have faith in Tongning. Even if she does come across a problem, she will definitely be able to resolve it. Plus, she has always been wary of Gabby. Imo Ting did not listen to a single word. He did not see a single thing. This troublesome wife of his, it seemed, he really needed to bring her under his banner before he could truly feel at ease. After JK's show was over, Tongning would have her sights set on becoming an international supermodel. According to her abilities, it wouldn't be long before she became a supermodel, was just around the corner. Tongning's finale will be the 23rd runway. Imo Ting looked at the entrance of the church and listened to the sound of the camera shutters. He suddenly realized he was so nervous that he actually broke out in a cold sweat. Little Tongning, work harder. You've already overcome so many obstacles. Don't fall on the international runway. I don't think you look bad, but how much longer will your confidence and courage stagnate? It didn't take long before the church was filled with a loud round of applause and screams. Emoting and Nzaheo lifted their heads to find Tongning and the British male model, Gabby, had already appeared in front of everyone. Tongning was dressed in a deep V-neck black dress. She looked sexy and devilish. The datura flower on her shoulder looked like it was about to blossom and be reborn. It carried with it a sense of struggle. Beautiful. Too beautiful. This kind of beauty was extremely flamboyant and left a deep impression on one's first glance. It could be said, it was unforgettable. She would make the entire venue pale in comparison. However, Emoting and Nzaheo watched nervously as Tongning walked out, especially as the male model approached her. Chapter 190. Who is this Asian model? Her legs are the most beautiful I have ever seen. She should be awarded first place in the world. Oh, my God. Is this an angel acting as the devil? She is stunning and beautiful. Tongning was confident and flamboyant. Especially after stepping onto the runway, she seemed to have changed into a completely different person. It was like she was born for the runway, because, through her eyes and aura, she revealed the soul of her clothes. The crowd erupted into applause. Many of the foreigners even screamed as they stood up and raised their hands in the air in praise. Meanwhile, the thing that worried Emoting and Nzaheo did not happen. Compared to Tongning, the person that acted unnaturally was Gabby. On stage, Tongning briefly caught sight of Emoting's figure. As their eyes met, it was like they had 1,000 things to say, but they didn't need to say them. I won't miss any of your important turns, because I can't let you stand on the stage alone and have no one to cheer you on, especially if you fail and everyone is waiting to laugh at you. But I will definitely be the one to help you back up. Tongning looked at Emoting's almost perfect face and wanted to smile at him. But because of the clothes she was wearing, all she could do was reveal a flirtatious smile. This caused the crowd below the stage to go crazy. Afterwards, Tongning and Gabby swapped places. This was an opportunity for Gabby to make his move. But just as Emoting and Nzaheo clenched their fists, they realized Gabby had no intention of doing so. He then turned around and walked away. Even though Tongning's figure had disappeared from the backstage, the audience's mind was still filled with images of her for a few minutes. Her aura, her looks, her heaven-defying legs, and her flirtatious smile. Above all, the big names in the fashion industry all declared that this Asian model would definitely become famous throughout the world. And they had already found out her name, Tongning. Afterwards, there were so many beautiful clothes that no one had the time to appreciate. But they still wanted to see this Asian model again. It wasn't easy for them to wait for the show to end. The designer led Tongning to the front of the stage as everyone stood up and gave her a thumbs up. However, Tongning's eyes were glued to Emoting, who was sitting in the back row. This is your glory. I'm proud of you. Tongning understood his lips as she smiled with tears in her eyes. It wasn't easy for her to resist the urge to run over and hug Emoting. At the same time, Lan Shi, who was waiting to see Tongning make a fool of herself, received a photo of Tongning, like a queen, stunning the entire audience. Fashion celebrities that had seen JK's show all gave their comments on Tongning, the purest soul, the best, and the walking runway. Afterwards, Lan Shi gave Gabby's manager a phone call and asked why they didn't go according to plan. We agreed in advance that we can't guarantee success, the other party replied in English. Fuck you, foreigner. Lan Shi cursed before downing the glass of wine in her hand. This was because Tongning seemed to be her natural nemesis. It was as if the more she tried to stop Tongning, the more Tongning would become. This time, he even became famous after a single battle at JK's show. That was equivalent to being plated with a layer of gold. It was clearly on a different level from the domestic A-grade models. As for her, she was still on the hottest headlines on the internet, being attacked day and night by netizens. After removing her makeup, Tongning accepted an interview from a few media outlets before leaving the church under Nzaheo's cover. Emoting's car was parked nearby. As soon as he saw Tongning, he immediately picked her up and drove her back to the manor. The reporter from Huarong Studio tailed Emoting's sports car the entire time. Because the glass was made of a special material, he had no way of getting a photo of the person in front of him. It wasn't until they entered the private manor that the reporter's car was stopped at the entrance that he reluctantly found a place to park his car. He then hid in a corner of the manor, wondering if he would be lucky enough to bump into Tongning. After entering the manor, Emoting led Tongning up to the second floor. After pushing open the bedroom door, he pressed Tongning against the wall and kissed her. "Tonight, I've been restraining myself. I've been restraining the urge to hug and kiss you." After speaking, Emoting removed his suit jacket and threw it on the floor. Tongning leaned against the wall and hooked her arms around Emoting's neck. Her fingers dug into Emoting's shoulders. She too wanted to keep this man by her side at all times. She wanted to hold him in her embrace. She wanted to see him and kiss him wherever she went. No one knew who ignited the spark, but the couple's lips were naturally pressed together as they absorbed each other's scent. Their battle escalated. Afterwards, the sound of fabric being torn could be heard. Of course, it was Tongning's clothes that were torn. Of course, there were times when she wanted to take the initiative. But this was the moment when a woman's strength was compared to a man's. The couple fell onto the bed as Tongning straddled Emoting's body. She wanted to tear his shirt apart, but she needed Emoting's help. Tongning was stunned for a moment as she looked at Emoting in the dark. She then leaned over and began absorbing his energy and nutrients. Their bodies intertwined, their bodies collided, and their passionate kisses caused the couple to lose control a few times. In fact, Emoting almost left marks on Tongning's body. But, in the end, all the energy was concentrated elsewhere, allowing the couple to experience extreme pleasure. After their passionate session, the bedroom was filled with an ambiguous atmosphere. Emoting carried Tongning in his arms out of habit as he examined her body. Only after confirming he hadn't left any marks did he relax. After all, Tongning still had work to do. Tongning rested her head on Emoting's abdomen as she faced Emoting with her eyes closed. The erosive feeling had already seeped into her bones. "Tired? You're more tired," Tongning said with a double meaning. Emoting chuckled as he gently stroked Tongning's hair. He then led her to the bathroom to wash up. Tongning lay in the bathtub, enjoying Emoting's care as she rested her head on his chest. "Did Long Jie find you in the end?" Tongning was silent for a moment before she finally responded. "But even if you didn't remind me, I wouldn't have gone easy on Gabby. To prevent him from causing an unmanageable situation during the runway show, I asked Long Jie to tamper with the soles of his shoes. This was also the reason why Gabby looked so unnatural on the runway several times. Compared to giving me a push, he was more worried about his shoes and falling on stage. So, he had to make sure he didn't embarrass himself, so he placed his attention on his shoes." Emoting smiled as he placed a kiss on Tongning's forehead. Sure enough, this little woman never disappoints him. But, you probably don't know yet, Lanshi has decided to remove Nzaheo from his position as manager. Chapter 191. Tongning propped herself up and looked at Emoting. "When did this happen?" "Long Jie told me that before your show, she overheard Nzaheo on the phone with Cheng Tian." Emoting stood up from the water, put on a large bathrobe, wrapped Tongning in it, and carried her out of the bathroom. Tongning sat on the bed. Her heart was suddenly filled with an indescribable feeling. Although she hadn't spent much time with Nzaheo, he had indeed put in a lot of effort for her. Apart from Emoting, no one was more suitable to be her manager. In reality, she had already treated Nzaheo like a friend. Since he was a friend, if he was hurt, she wouldn't feel good. "What are you thinking about? Even if, in the end, Nzaheo can no longer be my manager, I don't want him to be treated like this by Lanshi. No anger can compare to being bullied by a slut. Plus, Did you think Lan Shi would let Zaheo go so easily? I don't want Zaheo to leave Chung Tian from a top manager to a useless person. Tongning had reason to believe that Lan Shi was capable of doing something like this. He helped me in the past, so I can't let him end up like this. However, Tongning knew deep down that since Lan Shi had already removed Zaheo from his position as manager, it meant, no matter how much she struggled, she was going to lose Zaheo as her manager. Perhaps. And Zaheo was well aware of this. Inside the Luofu Hotel, Zaheo listed out all the recent invitations, current contracts, and completed work. He then explained to Long Jie what stage Tongning was currently at, what she should avoid, and how she should use her connections. Long Jie lay on the sofa listening to all this. Her heart was filled with discomfort. And Zaheo had already planned out Tongning's future path. According to his current progress, in less than half a year, Tongning would become a supermodel. She would be on par with Star King's models. I've said so much. Did you hear it all? And Zaheo asked as he knocked on Long Jie's forehead. Long Jie lifted her head and looked into Zaheo's eyes. She had never thought his eyes were so beautiful. They sparkled like they were glowing. Must you go? Luo Hao said a bunch of nonsense, but there is one thing I can't refute. I am Chung Tian's manager, so I must follow Lan Shi's arrangements. As Zaheo spoke, his eyes were filled with helplessness and pain. After Yun Xian's passing, Zaheo had never met another person that could ignite his passion for his career. He originally wanted to accompany Tongning to the end, but it seemed that was no longer possible. You haven't told Tongning about your departure, have you? The new manager is already on her way. After I've briefed you, she will be returning to Beijing. Long Jie took a deep breath as she tugged on the tassels hanging from the sofa. Because Lan Shi's method was as disgusting as swallowing a fly. Can't you just stay? In reality, Long Jie could see the difference between her and Zaheo. He was able to handle all of Tongning's invitations and contracts in an orderly manner. He was able to handle all kinds of dinners, interviews, and languages. Most importantly, he was a good person. After hearing Long Jie's words, Zaheo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Take good care of Tongning. After you return to Chengtian, President Lan will definitely think of a way to deal with you. I have nothing to be afraid of. After speaking, Zaheo stood up from the sofa and grabbed his jacket and luggage. If you can't handle these things, I'll leave them to President Mo. Long Jie really wanted to hold on to Zaheo, but she didn't know what to do. All she could do was wait for Zaheo to leave before giving Tongning a phone call. Hello, Long Jie? Tongning, Zaheo has left. He is heading to the airport to return to Beijing, Long Jie explained anxiously. Tongning sat up in bed. Her originally hazy eyes suddenly became extremely clear. She then gave Zaheo a phone call, but he did not pick up. Tongning had no choice but to send Zaheo a message. I won't object to you returning to Beijing today. But if I find out that you have been humiliated and tortured by Lan Shi, I won't let it go. Also, Lan Shi has no right to step all over you. No one can. After seeing Tongning's message, Zaheo let out a gentle laugh. Actually, after seeing Tongning say this, he felt everything was worth it to have a friend like her. In reality, he was reluctant. Mo Ting was awoken by Tongning's slight movements. He sat up and stared at her in a daze. Knowing she was in a bad mood, he got up and prepared a glass of warm water for her. Ting, I can't stand to see a friend suffer. Mo Ting sat cross-legged on the bed and wrapped his arms around her, comforting her. It's not like you won't see her again. But Lan Shi definitely won't let it go. After hearing this, Mo Ting placed his arm around Tongning's shoulder and said gently, I'm sure he knows what he wants. Even if Lan Shi makes things difficult for him and he can no longer be a manager, he studied directing in the past and has many award-winning works under his belt. Did you think he wouldn't have a way out? I simply hate Lan Shi for suppressing me. That won't happen. As Mo Ting said these words, his obsidian-like eyes contained a deeper meaning between a married couple. Tongning immediately understood what he meant. If Lan Shi dared to lay a hand on Zaheo, she would definitely be the one to suffer. But even though Zaheo's matter would have a perfect ending, she would no longer have a manager. Plus, she had made a name for herself with the help of JK. Her reputation was currently on the rise, and she had a lot of work to do. Was she really going to use the new manager that Lanshi sent over? It was likely that Lanshi would send over a piece of trash that would only listen to her. No one could stop Zaheo from returning to Beijing. As soon as he entered Changtian on his own, the staff all pointed and gossiped about him, not because of anything else, but because the recording of his phone call with Lanshi was still on the top search engine. Lanshi turned around from her office chair and threw a slap across Zaheo's face. Do you know why I hit you? Do you know how much criticism you've caused Changtian Entertainment to suffer? Lanshi questioned sharply, and Zaheo did not refute, nor did he retaliate. He no longer had any feelings towards Lanshi. Anger, hatred, and everything else were all buried deep in his heart. He was ready to seal them away. I don't care what you do, go and explain yourself. Otherwise, Zaheo, don't blame me for doing something even worse to you. For example? And Zaheo asked in a mocking tone, if you cause the company to suffer a loss, then it will be your fault. Do you want to lose everything before leaving? Or, do you want me to expose the fact that Yun Xian was a kept woman before she became famous? Chapter 192. After hearing this, Zaheo's eyes grew wide and filled with anger. He grabbed Lanshi and asked through gritted teeth, Yun Xian has already passed away. How could you be so ruthless that you wouldn't even let a dead person go? If you can't even care about the living, how could you care about the dead? Lanshi scoffed as her eyes became misty. And Zaheo, we have been friends for many years. We are friends. Yet, you are helping Tongning? What benefits did Tongning give you? Is it worth it for you to throw away our friendship for so many years? Tongning has never given me any benefits. Unlike you, she doesn't give me fame and money. But, Lanshi, in front of Tongning, I feel like I am living a normal life. At least, she isn't like you, constantly threatening me. After speaking, Zaheo loosened his grip and sneered, so, don't mention the word friend to me, it makes me feel disgusted. After being pushed away, Lanshi felt a heavy blow to her heart. I may make you feel disgusted, but don't you think about how difficult my life is? Tongning's life is much more difficult than yours. At least, you haven't come across a boss more vicious than you, but she has. And Zaheo saw Lanshi did not respond, so he decided not to continue arguing with her. I can resign and leave Changtian, but if you want me to help you clear the headlines, that is impossible. If you want to see Yun Xian being scolded by the netizens after her death, you can give it a try. And Zaheo looked at Lanshi and stared at her. It wasn't easy for him to resist the urge to hit her. In the end, he nodded his head. Okay, I'll fulfill your wish. What do you want me to do? Hold a press conference to clarify that this incident had nothing to do with me, and that you were the one who created this recording. And Zaheo looked at Lanshi's back helplessly. Didn't she want him to leave Changtian with his reputation in tatters? Since he had already gotten to this point, what difference did it make whether he took the blame or not? I promise. And Zaheo replied straightforwardly. But before he turned to leave, he added, you better not regret this. Lanshi did not turn around. She maintained her pride as a CEO as she scoffed mockingly. She already had Yun Xian's weakness in her hands. What else could Zaheo do? After Zaheo left the office, he did not tell anyone about his conversation with Lanshi. He simply headed to Yun Xian's grave on his own and sat in front of her tombstone for an entire day. Yun Xian, why didn't you take me with you back then? At this moment, it was already nighttime in the UK. Tongning had not received any news regarding Zaheo and was extremely anxious. It seemed there was nothing Lu Che could do to help with Changtian's family matters. Above all, Hairue already had enough to deal with. After Zaheo left, although Longjie was busy as usual, there were some things that required a lot of effort. Especially when it came to English, there were a lot of technical terms that she couldn't understand. Tongning. Let me see. Tongning picked up the laptop in her hands and looked at the comments Zaheo had already made. This is an invalid contract. It has already been rejected. Why didn't you say so earlier? I even spent a few hours translating it. After dealing with Hai Rui's matters, Imo Ting came out of the study room. Seeing the worried expressions on the two women's faces, he casually took the laptop from Tongning's hands. But Tongning was afraid he would be like this, so her mood became even worse. After Imo Ting finished looking through all of Tongning's emails, he placed the tasks that she needed to complete at the top of his list. Because of JK's success, Tongning might need to stay in the UK for a period of time. She had received a few more master-level runway offers. Ting, I want to return to Beijing. Tongning asked for Imo Ting's opinion. Imo Ting knew she was worried about her friend. Before Zaheo's matter was resolved, there was no way she could calm down and work. So, he nodded his head calmly. I'll get someone to book you a plane ticket and help you postpone your work until 2 days later. Tongning gently nodded her head as her heart skipped a beat. She knew, no matter what, Imo Ting would always stand by her side and support her every decision. At this time, the new manager sent by Lan Shi gave Long Jie a phone call. Long Jie reluctantly picked up the phone. In the end, the manager was even angrier than she was as she scolded. As an assistant, what are you trying to do by not letting a model stay in the room arranged by the agency? Where are you right now? It's already the middle of the night. Why haven't you returned to the hotel? Are you crazy? Thinking about it, the manager must have gone to the hotel empty-handed. Long Jie wanted to refute, but she realized she couldn't say a word. All she could do was stare at Tongning in a daze, speechless. Are you mute? Who told you to speak? Tongning suddenly snatched the phone out of Long Jie's hands and said, You have been fired? Who are you? How dare you fire me? Tongning. The manager thought it was Long Jie, so as soon as she heard Tongning's name, her attitude changed as she spoke in a flattering tone. I'm sorry, Ning Jie. I couldn't find you guys, so I got a little anxious. I'm sorry, you just happened to insult my assistant, so I'd like to ask you to not appear in front of me. If Lan Shi asks, you can answer her that even if a bag of trash is disguised as a manager, she is still trash. After speaking, Tongning hung up the phone and handed it back to Long Jie. This time, Tongning and the other two set off that very night. With the addition of JK's popularity, Tongning was even more careful than before. So, as the sports car drove out of the manor, the reporter from Huarong Studio did not manage to get a clear photo. In fact, he couldn't even get a clear shot of the back of the car. It wasn't until she boarded the plane that Tongning found out Luo Hao had released news about her and a male model in Beijing. It turned out, something like this had actually happened. Everyone had been hiding it from her. Imo Ting had even spent a fortune to keep Lan Shi on the hottest search rankings. There's no need to do this, really. I can't stand by and watch you suffer like this. Imo Ting replied in seriousness as he hugged her. Tongning had nothing to say. She simply held onto Imo Ting's hand and gently placed a kiss on the back of it. The reporter from Huarong Studio had once again missed his chance to take photos. But did that mean he wouldn't be able to get a photo? After almost 10 hours of flight time, Tongning and Long Jie quietly stepped out of the airport. Not long after, they saw a video announcement. Chung Tian Entertainments in Zaheo was about to hold a press conference. Tongning knew Lan Shi wanted in Zaheo to be the scapegoat, because she had endured this feeling before. But Lan Shi never expected she, Tongning, would return. Chapter 193. If Zaheo admitted that he fabricated the recording, it would mean that the truth about Tongning's innocence could be overturned. In other words, Zaheo's actions were a little suspicious. He was trying to cover up the truth. He was trying to cover up Tongning's messy private life and the fact that she was involved with multiple men. In reality, this was a difficult problem for Zaheo. In this decision, he didn't care if he got hurt, but he didn't want to hurt a dead lover and a living friend. Tongning quietly returned to Beijing and contacted all her friends that could help her. It wasn't that she was afraid of fighting with Lan Shi. She simply wanted to help Zaheo find the best way out. Tongning, I think you are being overly worried about Zaheo. He is, After all, a top manager and has his own way of dealing with things. He won't just sit there and wait to be threatened by Lan Shi. Long Jie tried to comfort Tongning on the way to Chengtian. What can you change by going to Chengtian? I'm not going to look for Lan Shi, Tongning replied calmly. I'm going to wait for Nzaheo. Do you have a better way to contact him right now? Long Jie shook her head. Nzaheo had never picked up any phone calls or contacted anyone. Since he was going to hold a press conference in the lobby of Chengtian, he would definitely be there early. Wait, Long Jie, can you ask around for the location of Yunexian's grave? Long Jie nodded her head. She was quite good at asking around for information. A moment later, she told Lu Che that they were heading straight to the grave. After picking them up from the airport, Lu Che was assigned by Mo Ting to be Tongning and Long Jie's chauffeur. As soon as the two met, they looked at each other awkwardly. Long Jie had previously suggested living together. Although Lu Che didn't understand in the end, Long Jie's heart was in turmoil, especially now that Lu Che was using his identity as her fiancé to act as their chauffeur. The awkwardness in her heart once again multiplied. As it was a cloudy and foggy day, Tongning wrapped herself in a trench coat and entered the grave. As expected, she found Nzaheo standing in front of Yunexian's grave. As their eyes met, Nzaheo was a little surprised as he quickly stood up. Why are you back? I still have a lot of work to do in London. You know I have a lot of work, so why did you leave so quickly? Tongning glared at Nzaheo before placing the bouquet of white roses she bought at the entrance of the cemetery in front of Yunexian's tombstone. Looking at the young and beautiful figure on the tombstone, Tongning couldn't help but place her hands together as a sign of respect towards the deceased. You've heard about what happened this afternoon. Yes. I suddenly understand why Mo Ting always says the same thing to me. You obviously have a perfect plan. Why do you always choose a path that hurts you? Now, I can understand how he feels because I also want to ask you the same question. Did you come back because you didn't want to be implicated, or do you think I'm still afraid of Lan Shi? I simply don't want my friend to experience the pain that I once experienced. Tongning, have you ever felt despair? Nzaheo lowered his head and reached out to touch the portrait on the stone tablet. Even though his lover had been gone for so many years, he still couldn't let go. Of course, 3 months ago, on the eve of our wedding, I discovered my fiancé cheating on me with another woman in front of my bed. But the next day, I picked Mo Ting up at the Civil Affairs office. Tongning replied, but even without Mo Ting, I wouldn't have given up on my right to love. Why should I? But I'm glad I met Mo Ting. Giving my love to him is worth it. Don't you think it's hard? Thinking about one person year after year and living the same life, that's what I call hard. After speaking, Tongning pulled out a business card from her handbag. I know you don't need any of these things, but I simply want to say, I'm giving you a chance to start afresh. At the press conference this afternoon, no matter what decision you make, I will support you. But Lan Shi, she better not give me a chance to retaliate. If she does, I will definitely tear her apart. After speaking, Tongning turned and left the cemetery, leaving Nzaheo alone in front of the tombstone to think. Tongning had said that even if she had been in despair, she would never give up on loving him. Nzaheo thought about this sentence over and over again. Suddenly, he felt like everything else wasn't as important anymore. So, he smiled as he looked down at the portrait on the tombstone and said, Yunexian, perhaps I've really sealed myself away for too long. Of course, a dead person's reputation was important, but it was all in the past. A living person was more important. 3 days after the press conference, Chengtian Entertainment's lobby was already filled with reporters. Nzaheo had something to say about Chengtian's recent scandal. On the eve of the press conference, Lan Shi stood to one side and chatted with Luo as she watched the staff prepare the venue. You should be careful of Nzaheo. He is, after all, a top manager. Back when the three of us were still together, he was always like this. On the surface, he seemed nonchalant, but in reality, he had already taken care of everything behind the scenes. He didn't need anyone to worry about him. Lan Shi crossed her arms as she turned to look at Luo and scoffed. But no matter how strong he is, he still has one weakness he can't get rid of. Unwavering? For the sake of unwavering, there's nothing he wouldn't do. Did you think he would betray his true love for Tongning? Lan Shi's confidence had always come from the bottom of her heart. But Luo Hao never had high hopes for her. Lan Shi's arrogance often made her neglect a lot of things. Change. Nothing lasts forever, and people change. But Luo Hao did not say a word because Lan Shi wouldn't listen. Only after suffering would she understand the power of change. 3:15 p.m. Zaheo walked into Chang Tian dressed in a gray suit. He approached Lan Shi and Luo Hao first and said to Lan Shi, "Don't forget what you promised me." Lan Shi smiled and nodded. "I will return all the information to you." Hearing this, Zaheo looked at Luo Hao with an inquisitive gaze. "Out of the three of us in the end, you still have the last laugh." Luo Hao lifted his chin and simply said, "The person I want to deal with is Tongning. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for standing on the wrong side. If you can't find a job in the future, you can let me know." And Zaheo let out a gentle laugh. All of a sudden, it had been a long time since Lan Shi had seen this kind of clean smile where he let go of everything. She simply felt the Zaheo at this moment was a little different. However, before she had time to think back, Zaheo had already disappeared from their line of sight and headed towards the stage. Did they want him to admit to faking the recording? The show was about to begin. Chapter 194. Amidst the snapping sounds of camera shutters, Zaheo calmly faced the media. The corners of his lips gently curved upwards as he looked at them with an ambiguous smile. The last time he faced such a grand scene was many years ago when Yoon Xian accepted the VL Global Spokesperson Award. Today, he was doing this for himself, so he could be reborn. The time was 3:20 p.m. The press conference officially began. Chang Tian's staff maintained order as they were given 15 minutes for the media to ask questions. Afterwards, Lan Shi walked onto the stage and scanned her eyes across the room. She then spoke, "Friends from the media, you have all worked hard. In response to the recent headlines and the false information that Chang Tian has released, we will give everyone a complete explanation. The reason why Chang Tian has gotten to where it is today is because of our abilities and hard work. However, recently, due to a certain reason, one of our models has been mysteriously suppressed. Now, I have been dragged into this mess for no reason. From the start, I have not stepped out to make a statement, because I believe in justice and I also believe that evil will eventually come to an end." As Lan Shi spoke, Zaheo was standing beside her. For a moment, he really wanted to ask Lan Shi, how could she have the nerve to say something like this? "Don't you feel humiliated at all?" Because of Lan Shi's words, she had unintentionally pushed all of Chang Tian's troubles onto Tongning. She was obviously trying to tell everyone that Chang Tian had been developing steadily, but because of Tongning's appearance, Chang Tian had been dragged into a whirlpool of troubles. Next, we would like to invite our top manager, Mr. Zaheo, to give an explanation. I'm sure he will be able to give everyone a satisfactory answer regarding the recording of the recent headlines. After speaking, Lan Shi took a step back. However, at this time, one of the media asked a question. "President Lan, I think I understand what you're trying to say. Are you implying that the reason Chang Tian is in so much trouble is because of the model that you recently signed, Tongning?" Her words were suddenly pointed out. Everyone looked at the reporter and the stunned Lan Shi. Originally, he thought she would at least say a few words and let the situation continue to be ambiguous. After all, Tongning was a newly signed model, and they had previously acted like they were welcoming a superstar. If they were to suddenly tear each other apart, wouldn't the scene be a little too ugly? However, Lan Shi did not explain or say anything. She simply smiled mysteriously. Everyone understood what he meant, so why did he have to make it so obvious? Afterwards, Lan Shi turned her dark gaze towards Zaheo. Because, apart from getting rid of Zaheo, Lan Shi's main goal today was to attack Tongning. Taking advantage of the fact that Tongning was still overseas and had no way to retaliate, she wanted to catch her off guard. Don't think that just because you successfully walked JK's show, you would be able to soar into the sky. No, there was no such thing as a bargain in this world. From Lanxi's reaction, the media had already guessed the purpose of today's press conference. It was obvious. They wanted to destroy Tongning. The industry had already sensed an internal conflict in Changtian. So, today, no matter what Lanxi said, she was going to slander Tongning. Zaheo? Lanxi reminded in Zaheo. Her voice was deep and threatening. After hearing this, and Zaheo nodded his head before he turned back to face the media. Today, I want to give everyone an explanation. Regarding the recording on the headlines, the truth is, before I reveal this secret, let me say something else. Just as Zaheo got to the crux of the matter, he suddenly changed the topic and smiled at everyone. I've been in this industry for so many years. I've gone from being a nameless assistant to where I am today. I can't even remember how many times I've stood on a stage like this. I want to say something that even makes me feel disgusted. Before I tell everyone the truth, I want to mention someone that everyone has already forgotten. Yoon Exian. The media looked at each other, unsure why Zaheo would suddenly mention Yoon Exian's name. Of course, the person with the worst expression was Lan Shi. She suddenly realized, and Zaheo was uncontrollable and made her feel uneasy. As everyone knows, Yoon Exian died in a car accident. That day, we had a huge argument. Yoon Exian drove over the speed limit and crashed into a guardrail, killing one and injuring the other. At that time, Chung Tian kept the information under wraps. I was naive enough to think they were doing it for my own good. But today, I finally understand the reason they kept the information under wraps was because they had a guilty conscience. And Zaheo, do you know what you're saying? Lanxi suddenly asked as she grabbed onto Zaheo's arm. And Zaheo let out a gentle laugh as he asked in a low voice, "Didn't you want me to reveal the truth? I will do as you wish, don't worry." After speaking, he freed himself from Lanxi's grip and continued to explain, because Chung Tian Entertainment single-handedly caused Yoon Exian's death. First, it was our beloved President Lan who hid in the dark and spied on Yoon Exian and I. Then, it was my two good friends, Yang Jing and Luo Hao, who leaked the information to the media. In the end, she got into a car accident. Isn't it very exciting? The reporters obviously didn't expect Zaheo to say something like this. They didn't expect him to suddenly reveal something that had happened many years ago. Lanxi suddenly understood why Zaheo had appeared on stage today. She immediately gestured for Luo how to find someone to escort him off the stage. However, Zaheo continued to speak. Do you know what the reason is? It's because of jealousy. Chung Tian CEO is jealous of the models under her management, so she has thought of many ways to control them. Yoon Exian from many years ago was one, and Tongning, who is currently gaining momentum, is another. The incident with Yoon Exian has been in the past for too long, so long that I've already forgotten about her methods. But Tongning, that recording is the best proof, because it is the real thing. I still have the original recording on my phone. Luo Hao and his bodyguards stepped onto the stage to forcefully escort Zaheo out of the venue. In fact, they even resorted to violence by using force in front of the media. Although Zaheo wasn't easily injured, Luo Hao added more people. Lanxi pretended to be calm and was about to announce the end of the press conference, but just as everyone was nervously watching the scene unfold before their eyes, a tall figure appeared at the entrance of Changtian. She was originally supposed to be in London. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.